our hearing commissioners, Nancy will also log on to Zoom. Hopefully. You have a quorum, so you're all all right.
And sorry, just to remind you, you need to use the microphone so the Zoom people can hear.
Can you hear me now? All right. Well, good evening, everybody. We're going to call to order the Parks, Trails, and Recreation Commission for Thursday, September 10th, 2020, and it is 5:33 p.m. Do roll call.
Kate Murphy, Fred Wolf,
Here.
Rod Eber, Aaron Rudensky,
Here.
Stephanie Dahl,
Here.
Tori Leviton,
Here.
Chelsea Scott.
Here. All right, we'll now do the pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we will start with our audience participation. Emily, do you want to do online first, or?
If we could take the in-person attendees first, that would be great.
So it looks like I have 2 people signed up. Is that? All right. And I apologize if I mispronounce your name. Cassiana Vanderbilt? Christina, I'm so sorry.
Hi, it's close. Thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening, and I am speaking in favor of vacating the bridle path easement and right-of-way adjacent to 4501 South Vineway and the dedication of the public trail easement on 4501 and 4505 South Vineway. Did I say that address? 5250 East Shenango Avenue. Probably nearly 25 years ago, I served on the city's, what was then the Parks and Trails Committee. And then when I was a member of the city's city council, I was known as somebody who never saw a trail she didn't like and who was very loath to vacate any trails that the city had. On the Parks and Trails Committee, and then I think when Jay came on board with the city, a couple of members of the committee, the Parks and Trails Committee, and Jay and I walked the trail that we're talking about vacating today. And it occurred to me at that time that that would be a very difficult trail to make anything really good happen with it. It would need tremendous infrastructure given where it was located and next to Little Dry Creek and what was happening with Little Dry Creek. And then when I looked at the trail again, it would have been February this year. That was even clearer, that there really is so much erosion that there's almost nothing left to make a trail out of. So I think that if the city is able to get something wonderful like a trail, off-street trail, in exchange for vacating that, then I think it would be a tremendous benefit. And again, I think the off-street trail gives people a nice experience, wonderful trees. You get to get off the street, enjoy yourself, and feel like you're in nature. So I hope that the commission this evening sees the way clear to making that recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Janie Carpenter.
Hi, everybody. My name is Janet Carpenter, and I'm at 9 Random Road. And I'm here as also on behalf of the Cherry Hill Land Preserve. Thomas Ferry reached out to us to sort of say, hey, what do you think about this idea? What are the things that we should consider if we were to propose an additional trail? And so I'm here to speak in favor of this similar trail vacation and easement dedication that Christina just referenced. I also walked the trail, several of us have, and from the Land Preserve. And sort of the net benefit, it is a dead-end trail. And as Christina said, it is got limited potential for in terms of connectivity. And so by the proposal to demolish the home and provide more open space in that neighborhood, we feel is a real opportunity for the community, the neighborhood, to have more open space, to have view sight lines through the trees. It won't be, as we understand it, there won't be a wall of trees or fenced off from the public. It will be a sight line that can increase the feel of open space. And we really think that additional trail on the side provides connectivity, which right now neighbors walk on the street, no big deal. But in some ways it is safer, and families with young children, to wander through little trees and explore a natural space. That's a lot safer than walking through the trees. It gives you, or walking on the street. So we really think that is an opportunity to expand open space in our community. Yes, it'll be privately owned. It won't be a public park. It won't be drawing additional people into the community, but it should benefit and enrich the neighborhood. It's provide better habitat, more trees, which is all good for us all. And that sort of supports open space and habitat and wildlife throughout the village, right? Just having more spaces that support them. And so we think it's a very good idea, and financially it seems to be a good deal for the village as well. Obviously, if there are concerns to figure out how to make sure it maximizes that feel of that trail, wending its way through some trees, not just running along right along the edge of the street, that would be ideal. But we think that so far, the Armstrongs have been very eager to work with the community to design something that works for everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Emily, is there public comment on mine?
Yes, there is, and Laura can switch to the next screen, and it will have a list.
Oh, perfect. All right. First, we'll have Chris Bittman.
Great, thank you all very much. I appreciate you letting me join you electronically, at least. And I'm afraid that it was a little difficult to hear online on who the first speaker was. And I know that I can't engage, but just speak. But I would ask if there is someone in the audience that does intend to speak on behalf of the Homeowners Association on this issue tonight. I don't know if anyone can let me know, and if not, I'd be happy to quote from the letter that the Homeowners Association has written on the issue.
There's no one else signed up for public comment in person at this point, so I'm not sure if any of the other participants on our list for virtual are going to speak on behalf of the Homeowners Association, but
okay, well, I appreciate that. I'll just take a couple minutes then very quickly to comment. My name is Chris Bittman. I live at 4601 South Vine Way in Cherrymore, and so I think directly impacted by the considered action as it relates to the petition. And I guess I would quote from the letter from the Homeowners Association to the members of the commission that was dated this week, speaking to this petition. Just to quote from it, it says that the board fully supports the first part of the petition to vacate the existing bridle path easement along the back of the property as the path essentially goes nowhere, and supports the purchase of the property by the Armstrongs, as they've always been wonderful neighbors and very supportive of the Cherrymore neighborhood. The board does not support the creation of a new easement along South Vine Way, as it would not be in keeping with the amended declarations of covenants and restrictions of Cherrymore South that govern the homeowners association. Specifically, section 4 says that no residential lot shall be used except for single family residential purposes. The board is in agreement that the creation of a bridle path easement along the front of the property would effectively remove any future residential status if that property were to ever be sold, and therefore have an impact on the neighborhood, the use, and the value of that property. And so for all of those reasons, the board of the Cherrymore Association, representing all the homeowners, respectfully requests that the portion of the petition related to vacating the existing bridle path easement be approved, but that the proposal to create the new easement along South Vine Way be denied. I've written a letter also with a similar bias that we oppose just a part of the petition, that the vacation of the easement located adjacent to the west side of 4501 South Vine Way is appropriate, as it dead ends and serves limited public interest. But our neighborhood was really designed for single family homes. We enjoyed the unique nature of that setting. And we think the new easement and trail would materially change the property's use and value, as neither of those parcels would be a residential property for future owners as a result. So I would respectfully request that you acknowledge the concerns of those most impacted, and that's those that live in this neighborhood directly, and deny that portion of the petition. And I would encourage the commission, if you would allow the other participants, given the unique nature of having to dial in and being unable to be there in person, to be allowed to speak on the issue, even if we may have been mistaken in the formal request to ask to speak, at least during the public period. And that's all I have on my end. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Jennifer Allen? Jennifer, are you there? Or Kevin?
Hi, this is Kevin Allen. Jennifer's sitting here with me, but she's not logged in. We live at 4502 South Vine Way, right across the street from 4501. And we have submitted a letter consistent with what our HOA has done. You know, we fully support the vacation of the existing easement. We fully support the Armstrong's plan for the property. We believe they'll do a fabulous job, and they have been great neighbors to the Cherrymore neighborhood. We do object to the creation of a new easement, essentially along the front of that property, which is very unusual, if not would not be the only one of its kind in the village. But we just believe that creates an undue permanent burden on those properties, so they cannot be used the way that they are intended under our covenants. So we would respectfully request that that part of the petition be denied.
Is there anything you wanted to add, Jennifer? I don't want to step over you.
No, I concur with those statements. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't know if David and Bee Aspinwall are on the same.
They're separate.
They're separate. All right, we'll start with David Aspinwall.
Yes, can you hear me? Make sure.
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I want to first of all thank the Armstrongs and the Bregas. We live next door to the Bregas at 4401 South Vine Way, so we are their direct neighbor. And the Armstrongs have been great to the Cherrymore community. The Bregas have been great neighbors. And I also want to thank Thomas Berry, because he's been very professional. He's the Armstrong's agent in this, and I want to thank his courtesy for all the work he's done in trying to find common ground. Bay and I support the Armstrong proposal almost in its entirety. The sale of the Brega property to the Armstrongs, we support. We support the demolition of the house. We also support the vacation of the trail that runs on the west side of the Brega property This is a trail that's basically not used. One of your other, the first person that spoke said it's almost, there's almost nothing there to maintain a trail, and that's correct. So it's basically not used. It dead ends at the end of the Bregas property. Whatever expense the village has in maintaining it isn't worth it because no one's using it. And so we think vacating that trail is a good idea. Where the only issue we have is the placement of the trail on the east side of the Brega property along Vine Way. And this is an issue that we think we want the proposal to go through with, except for that bridle path along Vine Way. And I think this is something that can be accomplished through the village's help. The existing trail runs along the west side of the Bregas property. It goes from one end of the Bregas property to the other end, and that's where it goes. That's it. It dead ends at the north end of the Brega property. The trail was originally intended to be Race Street, but it was never built, and the location of Little Dry Creek makes it impossible to really do anything with it. So to me, the most logical solution is to vacate Race Street and the bridle path. The trail basically doesn't exist. The trail is not used. It's not well maintained. I assume, and I don't know this, but there's probably potential liability for the village, which by itself, I would say is not a reason not to keep the trail, but in conjunction with the fact that it's not used, it just doesn't make sense to me that you would want to keep it. By vacating the trail, the village, I think, is essentially losing nothing, and it gains a buffer, the open area, the habitat, the open space that one of your other speakers mentioned. The proposed bridle path on the east side of the property does raise a number of issues. It makes what is currently the Brega property basically unsellable if it ever comes to a point where it has to be sold. We don't know what the future holds. If you try to sell it with a path across the front of it, it just seems like you couldn't sell it. It changes the character of Cherrymore because I don't know of anywhere in Cherrymore where there is a trail that runs along Vineway or Cherrymore, the two roads that run through our neighborhood. And it also impacts our property, the Aspinwall property, because basically the trail would dead end at the front end, the front side of our property on Vine Way. So as I said, we support and strongly support the Armstrong's proposal, except for that trail. We support the vacation of the existing trail that isn't used anyway. And so I don't see that the village, and I understand the village doesn't like the idea of giving up a trail, but I don't see what they're giving up in this case because nobody's using the trail. We propose the vacation of the existing bridle path, no new trail. The village loses nothing because the existing trail is not used. It's a short distance just from one end of the Brega property to the other. The new trail would basically be in somebody's front yard if anybody ever needed to buy that property. Cherry Hills Village might eventually, if something happened to the trust or to the Armstrongs where they no longer could maintain it, Cherry Hills or somebody's going to have a cost to maintain that trail. I also understand and I deeply respect the fact that Cherry Hills doesn't like to set a precedent. But in this case, I think there's a difference. And the difference is the trail's not used. It's basically not there. I mean, you can find it, you can go there and walk it, but nobody is using it. So there's lots of lawyers, and any good lawyer should be able to draft language that would narrowly fashion an exception to Cherry Hills' position that it won't vacate trails. And this one, because it's basically non-existent, I think a good attorney could figure it out and make it narrow so it's not really setting any precedent. So I humbly request that you go ahead and vacate the existing trail, but you don't put in the new trail. Thank you.
Thank you. Jay Aspinwall? All right, I'm gonna move on to Mary, but if they want to speak, we'll come back to you. I apologize. Mary Waddington?
Okay, my name is Mary Kay Waddington. I live at 1809 East Tufts. I'm sorry that I didn't know much about this until hearing people talk tonight. So I'm not terribly prepared to speak, but I'm the nobody that people were saying, don't use that trail. I use that trail a lot. I know it's a dead end, but it's still a lovely trail and I use it a lot. And I assume that there's some reason why it never continued on north. I don't know the reasoning behind that. Would it not be possible, if you're looking just at the way trails work, to instead of vacating that, just do a very short trail that goes up to Vine Way on the north side of 4501? Now, as far as trails go, that to me makes a lot more sense. But of course, the whole point is that somebody wants to have a bigger piece of property without it being divided. That's what this is about. I'm the person who doesn't allow the Armstrongs to have their big square. I'm the corner that I won't sell them to. So that's my take on this. I use the trail. I like the trail. There are other dead-end trails in the village that are used as well. And it makes more sense to take a short easement that's on the north side of 4501 than to go clear around on the other side. So that's my take on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. And just for the record, I think the address is listed as 1908.
Wait, I can't hear you. Can you say that again?
I was just clarifying the record. Mr. address is listed as 1908 East Tufts Avenue. I believe it's 1809 East Tufts Avenue. Is that correct?
1809 is correct, yes.
Thank you. All right, Kathleen Finley.
We don't have her. She hasn't signed in.
Oh, okay. And Faye Aspinwall.
And she might go by Inez. There was some confusion as to her first name. So.
She goes by Faye. She's on the line. Faye, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Okay, I concur with everything that my husband David said, and I really don't have anything further to add. So thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, everybody. We appreciate the public comments. Now we're going to move on to the consent agenda and the approval of the minutes. Has everyone had an opportunity to review the minutes from August 13th, 2020? And do I have a motion?
Sorry, the Zoom participants will not be able to hear you, which includes Commissioner Leviton, unless you're speaking really into your microphone. So please just bring your microphone down close and do use it so that everyone can hear.
I move to approve the minutes of August 13th, 2020. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain?
Aye.
All right. Any unfinished business? Is there anything to cover on unfinished business?
There is not.
All right. Move on while everybody's here. New business. All right, the vacation of the bridle path easement and right of way adjacent to 4501 South Vine Way, and dedication of non-motorized public trail easements on 405, 4501 and 4595 South Vine Way.
Yeah, well, I will be very carefully saying addresses now as well. So this issue before PTRC is, shall PTRC make a recommendation to the Planning and Zoning Commission for the vacation of the bridle path easement and right of way on 4501 South Vine, and the dedication of a non-motorized public trail easement on 4501 and 4595 South Vine Way. So the city's municipal code does outline a specific process for the vacation of right of way easements. that's been included in PTRC's packet. Council considered this as a preliminary position back in November of 2019, and at that meeting, council determined that the preliminary position possessed sufficient merit to move forward. So we've now received a complete submittal from Charles F. Braga and Stanford & Vine LLC. And as specified in the code, notice of this meeting was sent to every homeowner within 500 feet of that property. A letter from one of the applicants is included in your packet along with the application. There are also public comments received by the city. Public comments are submitted by the applicant, and then on the dais, PTRC also has public comments submitted since packet went out last Friday. And that public comment has also been emailed to the commissioners participating over Zoom. So the Cherry Garden subdivision plat shows a section of street right of way on the west side of 4501 South Vine, labeled Ray Street. No road was ever constructed in that right of way. Adjacent to and east of the right of way, in black on the map in front of you, there's a utility drainage and bridle path easement. The 20-foot trail easement runs north from South Vine Way through to Quincy Avenue. There is a bridle trail, Trail 2045, that was constructed within the right of way, not within the trail easement, that travels north from South Vine. It dead ends at 4401 South Vine. Another trail runs north to Quincy Ave, and the two trails don't connect even though an easement exists. So the application requests the vacation of both the Ray Street right of way and the bridle trail component of the bridle trail, of the bridle path, utility, and drainage easement on the west side of 4501 South Vine. If the vacation of the right of way and bridle path easement is approved, the right of way will become part of the 4501 South Vine property and be used for private purposes. The former bridle path easement will continue to serve as an easement for utilities and drainage. There are active utilities within the easement, including the city-owned sanitary sewer trunk line. The utility and drainage easement and access to those utilities will remain in place if the vacation of the bridle path easement is granted. And then, as you've heard from neighbors, included in the vacation application is a proposed dedication of a new non-motorized public trail easement on the east side of 4501 and 4595 South Vine Way. Under the development agreement included in the application, the applicant would construct a trail with landscaping within the new easement adjacent to the road. A landscaping plan is included in the application, and we'll hear more about it from the applicant as well. Upon review of all the submitted documents and following site visits, staff has determined that creating the connection between Trail 2045 and 2043 is not feasible. Little Dry Creek has eroded far enough through the right of way and through the easement that trail construction would require so much grading, so much stabilization of the creek that it's not economically reasonable to consider that approach. Therefore, it's likely Trail 2045 would remain the dead-end trail. The alternate proposed easement provides trail users a safer solution than walking or riding on the street at South Vine Way to travel between other nearby trails. So now that a complete submittal has been received and reviewed, for the code, PTRC makes a recommendation to the Planning and Zoning Commission, and thereafter the Planning and Zoning Commission will make its recommendation to City Council regarding the approval of vacations and the dedication of the easement. There is no budget impact based for this item. For the code, the applicant has deposited $10,000 in escrow, and that covers the legal and engineering expenses associated with this application. At this time, staff is recommending approval of the vacation of the bridle path easement and right of way on 4501 South Vine, and dedication of a non-motorized trail easement on the east side of 4501 and 4595 South Vine Way. I just want to note that we also have assisted producer Randall Sampson on Zoom if there are specific legal questions. And I'm happy to answer any questions, or we can move on to the applicant's question.
Maybe let's see the applicant's presentation and then we can full picture and then we can move on to questions.
Good evening, Commissioners. How are you? Nice to see you all. I'm going to
bring up a little PowerPoint presentation, and show you some visuals and walk you through what we've all been talking about. So just give me a moment here. I had this all pulled up earlier, but let me close my computer to check out. Connecting, here we go.
And we have gotten a request for everyone to speak directly into the mic. People are having a hard time hearing on Zoom. So.
Okay, we're getting somewhere now. There we go. Can everyone see the presentation? Excellent. So first of all, my name is Thomas Berry. I live at 1800 East Stanford Avenue, Sheridan's Village. I'd like to thank you all, first of all, for viewing our presentation tonight and listening to our proposal. I am here on behalf of the Armstrong family, as well as the Berry family, who are present this evening. I'd also like to introduce my colleagues that I do have that may support me this evening. If there's specific questions, I want to be sure we get accurate information. So we have Ann Zexter and Noel Ricadella, who are representing from a legal standpoint. My co-worker Meredith Grossart and Paul Hayning, who's our ground manager and arborist at the Armstrong residence. So good knowledge of the trees and the trails and that type of thing. So what brings us here today? We would like to officially, as you heard from many of the speakers today, and I'd also, first of all, like to thank the people that Christina, as well as Janie, and the Sharimore residents that are joining us via Zoom, as well as Mary on Tufts as well. Thank you so much for sharing your comments, your concerns, and your support of the Armstrongs and everything that we're looking to do here. So we are looking, as we said, to vacate the existing bridle trail and dedicate a new public trail. Just a quick kind of history here. So the Brady family built their home in 1978, which just so happens to be the year I was born. This is a good year. If you look at this picture here, I thought this was really great. This is, I'm not sure if this was one of their home warming parties, but this is circa 1978. And this is looking kind of from the house in a west, almost southwesterly direction, looking into the existing pond that's there today, towards the home. You see in the background, that's 4595. So that's the Armstrong's on that residence there. So this kind of shows you the two properties adjacent to each other. Currently, you can't just see right through to that house. It's heavily treed, and obviously things have grown up over the years. So kind of a neat picture there. But Greg's built this home 42 years ago. Chuck raised his family there, and it means a lot to him. And Bill and Liz Armstrong moved to Trails Village 29 years ago, raised their children here as well. So they both have a deep connection to the village. They were neighbors for 17 years. During that time, they developed a good friendship. And when it came to time for Chuck to downsize, to move to a smaller home, originally people that were putting offers on the property and the house were looking at it in terms of development. Can I tear this down, put up a spec home, or tear this down and put up what we like to call the McMansions, right, the big homes. And so Chuck wasn't too excited about that. Are these people going to care for my fish, and are they going to take care of my trees, or are they going to cut them all down? So when the Armstrongs expressed interest, that became very intriguing to Chuck. And so Bill and Chuck had a nice conversation, kind of a gentleman's agreement. You know what, Chuck, I'll buy your house, but we've got to do something with that trail that lies in between our two homes. What do you think? Well, I think we could probably do that. Chuck said so. off we went. And so I got a phone call, hey, can you go down to the city and see what's involved with vacating this trail? I had no idea at that point how involved this was going to be. So I want to thank the city staff for their guidance and help over the past years. It's been a journey to get here. So we're happy to be here today. So now that you know the history a little bit there, as you heard from all the other speakers tonight, there's this trail to nowhere. And I want to just kind of give you some visuals here for you all, any of you on the dais that have not been to the trail personally. I'm not sure how many of you have or have not, but I'll just kind of walk you through here. You can see my cursor up on the screen. So the pink dots, that's obviously showing the trail with the dead end here at the end. Here's a picture in the center of what it looks like if you're standing on South Vine Way, looking down the trail, and then the far picture on the right is the actual dead end. Now, if you were to hop that fence right there and walk about 30 feet forward, that's where you come to this friendly cliff right here. So it's hard to tell in the picture, but you actually can follow my cursor. There's a section of roots right here. This is actually an evergreen that is surviving somehow, but the whole root structure is just hanging there, and all the soil is completely eroded from underneath it. So that tree eventually is just going to fall in. So as Emily stated, there's no viable connection point. On the picture on the right-hand side here, you can actually see the creek, Little Dry Creek, which is such a fabulous feature of Cherry Hills Village, and obviously everybody loves it, but it has done a number on this embankment. So there is no plausible connection point there, short of building some sort of crazy suspension bridge, which I don't think is feasible at all. Now, let's take a walk here over to the north side, the opposite side of the creek. So coming down on Trail 2043. So this is looking in a southerly direction. So first one where you see the trail indicators, walk forward from there, and then you come across another split rail fence that's heavily wooded. If you continue, walk right up to the split rail fence and look down, this is what you see. Very heavily wooded. This one's even steeper. I estimated it about 20 feet. So as you can see, again, no real plausible connection point there. And it's ultimately, to be honest, it's not really all that safe either. So here's just more documents, just kind of outlining the current condition. We spent a lot of time and effort working with surveyors to really accurately survey this, to make sure. We wanted to make sure that, we're going to do this, we're doing it right. It was hard to survey because of how wooded it was and the erosion, but we did get this survey pretty accurately done here on the right-hand side, and then this is kind of an interpretation on the left where you can kind of see where the creek would lie there. So that brings us to the proposal. Obviously, as you've heard, we're looking to vacate the trail for all the reasons that everybody has already mentioned. I don't really need to go into that into too much more detail, I don't think. The dedication of the easement. So this, when we came to the city a year ago, and we sat down with the city staff and we said, here, this is what we're thinking of doing. How would we do that? And what would that include? They were great. They shared with us the vision of Cherry Hills Village trail system and the vision of the PTRC. And that basically is that we want to improve, enhance, expand, connect, beautify our trail system. We're not in the business of getting rid of trails. We want more trails. So, our first ask was, can we just vacate this? And the answer was, not really. So, it probably wouldn't go through. It's not something the city's looking to do. So, we wanted to get creative. So we spent a lot of time researching, talking to great groups like the Cherry Hills Land Preserve and people like Lucina and Highland Canal Conservancy and just local community members and people that have a much longer experience reigning with the trail system than I. I lived here for 6 years, feel very blessed to live here. And gathered the feedback, and I did a lot of research into the city and the history. I even joined the 75th anniversary committee because I wanted to learn more about the city and become part of this story that's being told here. And so through that process, I learned more about the master plan and vision, which is to connect our trails, to enhance our trails, to make them better. So we thought, okay, well, how can we do this? So that's where we came up with this concept. And I think I just want to make sure this is very clear. at no time were we looking for any sort of quid pro quo, where if you give us this, we'll give you that. The concept here is a realignment of an existing trail. Taking a trail that's there that we all know has faults and many faults. So how do we take that existing trail that is not very good and turn it into a better trail that follows guidelines and vision, the master plan of the city? So this is what we came up with. It's a little hard to see here on your screen because it's obviously, a larger trail, we're not zoomed in, but essentially, as Janie kind of discussed, and with what we learned from talking to the community, especially Cherrymore residents, was nobody is interested in a standard Trails Village bridle trail running along the side of South Vine Way. Reason being, it would just be a simple 16-foot swath of natural grass, which doesn't create that much interest. So we thought, what if it was a nature trail? What if it featured mature trees and landscaping elements and had a meandering trail that goes through it? We kind of took inspiration from the existing trail that runs between 4595. You can see my cursor here. I don't know how many are familiar with. There's a trail that goes east to west. It goes right at the south end of 4595, and it actually goes over a beautiful bridge over Little Dry Creek, and then it butts into Tufts. And so it gives a real nice access point to Old Cherryl's Village. Great trail. I ride it all the time with my kids. A lot of people use it. It's really, really nice. So, and it has a crusher fines pathway down the center that's approximately 8 feet wide, and that's where we kind of got that inspiration of the crusher fines path, even though that's not a normal application within the Cherryl's Village trail system. So we thought, number one, we want connectivity. So if we just put a trail on 4501, which is the Breger property, well, that would just be a little segmented trail. So the Armstrong said, you know what if we actually connected that trail that connects to Tuff Street with this proposed trail that runs along 4595 or 4595 and 4501. So we increase connectivity. So the Armstrongs are willing to do, this is 2 easements on 2 of their properties, which feels quite generous in terms of the easement dedication. And that allows us to create basically a 20-foot easement, which includes, there's already currently a 5-foot right of way in from the curb the city owns, and then we would add an additional 15-foot easement onto that, creating a 20-foot swath along 4595 and 4501. Within that 20-foot swath, we would create this nature trail. So I just wanted to touch real quick before we actually do a walkthrough of the trail with kind of the big picture vision. The Armstrong's property it's a beautiful place. It's an open space. You take a walk down Cherrymore and look over the split rail fence into 4595, you have a beautiful view down, and you can see towards Little Dry Creek, and there's a collection of mature trees, deciduous and coniferous trees, and it's just very natural. It's not formal English gardens by any means. And the main attribute of the property is the trees. Mr. Armstrong and Mrs. Armstrong both just love trees. They're stewards for the arbor. And so we have 800 trees approximately on site. We have 60 plus varieties, and we have Paul Koenig, who's got a brilliant mind in the arborist world, and he cares for them. So they're all like our babies. And so the vision with the property and why Mr. Armstrong and Mrs. Armstrong would like to include the Breger property into this is to just expand on that natural open space, preserve the beautiful trees that are currently on Chuck's property, and add to that. Spade in some new trees, some new species, foster that, and protect it, conserve it for many, many years, many generations to come, versus just a big house where they cut down the trees and things like that. So that's just the kind of overall vision of why this came about. The action plan, the Armstrongs and our team, we have a plan in place. If the PTRC, Planning and Zoning, and City Council all agree with this plan, we have a plan where we can construct this trail at the Armstrong's cost, as well as maintain it. It will be irrigated, it will be beautiful, and it will be taken care of. If you look through your packets, there's a maintenance agreement within that that stipulates that the deeded owner of the property is responsible for the cost of maintenance and the high standardized maintenance care of the property for perpetuity. So whether the Armstrongs own it or somebody else buys the property in the future, it will be taken care of to a very high standard for perpetuity. So I wanted to take you through a little walk along the proposed path because it's hard to kind of visualize from a 2D perspective. So I took some pictures with my iPhone and did kind of a little rudimentary green line thing here, so bear with me on that. To give you some perspective, this is the northeast corner of 4501. So I'm standing basically on the property line where it touches the southeast corner of the Aspen Malls property, which is a beautiful property with a horse pasture. So this is where the trail would start on this end. So we roughly have a trailhead somewhere in this area. The one thing that's really important to note is that we are maintaining driveway access to the property. The property will always be a residential property. It will have residential access. It will have, continue to have Xcel Power. It will have a city water tap. It will have wells. Irrigation we will not take it out of residential status at any point in time. So trailhead here. Now this is what we call the East Berm, which has a beautiful selection of mature pine trees. And again, Mr. Armstrong, big loving trees, we actually call him the Lorax. He doesn't want to cut down a tree ever. So we want to preserve these trees. We originally thought, wouldn't it be cool if we could meander this trail through these trees? Ultimately, we felt like it would be a little bit of a safety concern and it just would be a little tough with equestrians and things like that. So we ultimately designed the trail to run on towards the street side of the pines. At any point, if we can, it'll kind of, meander in towards the trees a little bit, where you'd have a little bit of, possible turf or plantings on the curbside. But for the most part, where the large pines are, it'll be closer to the road. And this is 8-foot wide crusher pines path, graded, flat and smooth, so it's safe. And then as you continue around the berm, same thing. As you get to the end is when it kind of veers, and again, forgive my little green squiggly lines here, it's hard to envision, but obviously this driveway here would go away, and this would be spaded in with big, beautiful, mature trees. We actually have, as I mentioned, 800 trees on site. We're planning on relocating some of them over to here. So trees that would be on the curbside or between the trail and the road, those would be more columnar in nature. Trees are not going to branch out too heavily, this way, so that it'll create some nice interest but not interfere with the roadway. But the idea is to have this trail kind of meander back and forth between different landscaping features and trees. This big blue spruce right here is a bit of a leaner. Unfortunately, it is kind of right in the way of where we would like to put the path. So there's been a discussion to bring in the largest tree spade in the world to tree spade it, but we're not sure that's really the best idea. So this tree might actually have to be removed, but it will be replaced with multiple other mature trees along the side of it. Moving on to the next slide, this is where the property kind of opens up here right now. As you can tell, with our really hot, dry drought summer, it's been really challenging to keep the turf green. It is water from the pond, and literally the pond just has not been able to produce enough water from the well to keep up with the water needed this summer with the drought. So we worked really hard to still keep it green for the Bragas. So this is where it would get really interesting. We've got trees planted on the left side and the right side, and it'll just kind of meander through, and it'll be on the left it would be turf, and on the right it would be mulch, and it would be ornamental grasses, and just nothing too crazy, all manageable, but in between kind of nature-scape and natural landscaping. So creating a real kind of interesting trail. As you get a little farther on, there's actually an aspen grove. We would cut probably 10, 12 foot little section out there, so you actually go go through the Aspen Grove, which we think would be kind of neat. And then from there, you actually now, this is where you transition to the 4595 property. There's two gorgeous locust specimen here. Those would be within the easement. Those would be maintained by the Armstrongs from an arborist standpoint, watering everything. The trail would actually go on the west side of those trees. As you pass over the driveway to 4595, the current material of the driveway is asphalt. That would change to crusher fine, so it's a consistent trail as it passes over the driveway. You don't have to change mediums there. And then as you pass by the entry to 4595, which again, just want to make sure 4595 is staying a residence, it will not lose its residential status. We'll still have a driveway accessing it. It'll just have a trail beside it, just like a lot of the homes in Cherry Hills Village has a trail alongside of it. As we get to this, so the southeast corner of the 4595 property, you see a large green spruce right here. That tree we actually spaded in there about a year ago, year and a half. It's doing really well. We'd actually spade it up and move it over to the current Bragg property. This fence would go in 20 feet, and the trail would then actually have a nice arc, and it would connect to that trail that goes over to Tufts. So that's a little walkthrough on the trail. Many of these benefits have been outlined tonight by Christina and Jamie. I just want to touch on them again. Again, we're really looking to increase the usability and the connectivity of the Cherry Hills Village trail system. One thing that I found consistent in reading a lot of documents online about Cherry Hills Village is their efforts, especially now it's becoming even more relevant, is to reduce urban density and keep that kind of semi-rural country feel. You know, the more permits that happen to put up bigger houses and things, it's taking away from that country feel. So by removing the home and naturalizing the ground, the property, we feel that is in line with the Cherry Hills Village vision of reducing urban density. There won't be a family living there. So increasing the public sightlines. One thing that is mentioned here, this isn't part of the formal petition, but we have gone through all of the steps with Excel, CenturyLink, and Xfinity to work towards undergrounding the power lines that come up adjacent to the trail we're looking to vacate. There's a big ugly pole right kind of midway along the old trail with a transformer and everything and all the wires, and it's unsightly. We have everything in place to underground those wires. So that'll be an additional bonus to the community, is those sightlines will be improved by undergrounding the wires at the cost of the Armstrongs again. We are looking to support the greater community, and that's another point I just want to make, is that we are looking through this whole process, started last November. We have made every effort to connect with anybody in the community of Cherry Hills Village, anybody in Sherrymore, with open arms, welcoming their feedback, their concerns, their input as to how do we make this a win-win for every single person. It's very important to the Armstrong, very important to Greg, to myself and my team. So we also, anywhere we can help, we would like to. So for example, before we tear down the house, if there's anything of value in the home that can be auctioned off, any of those funds we'd like to donate to a local group, potentially the Cherry Hills Land Preserve, something like that. If there's things that can be used for Habitat for Humanity, anything we can do to contribute, that would be the goal as well. Again, the newly constructed trail would offer a unique nature walk experience. The trail would be equestrian friendly, and it's a nice route on the way to Woody Hollow Park, which is such an amazing thing to have just down the road from in our community. It's just spectacular for the equestrians. And we do feel like the safety will be increased. I have a 7-year-old daughter who is in grade 2 at Cherry Hills Elementary, and she loves riding her bike, and every day, can I ride my bike to school? Can I ride my bike to school? She's not old enough to go by herself yet, so I ride with her. We literally go through 4595, and we pop onto South Vine Way, and we have to go up the street to get over to where we need to go to her school. And unfortunately, there are FedEx truck drivers and landscaper trucks that just they drive too fast around that corner. Unfortunately, it's not a very busy street, but there are vehicles like that do travel quickly. And so there's a little bit of a safety concern there there isn't a sidewalk, there's nowhere for the kids to actually ride the bikes on the street safely. So this would offer them an opportunity to get off street and onto a safe trail. When they do come around to where the trail ends, it does not have alternate connectivity. We wish we could create that kind of a scenario, but it does have a direct sight line with the next trailhead. So we feel like that is an improvement in connectivity. Although it's not alternate connectivity, it's an improvement in connectivity. So those are the things we feel are the benefits. And then just in conclusion, first of all, we want to thank you for your time. We look forward to all your questions. I'm sure there's a lot of them. We sent out a packet, Armstrong sent out a packet to all the neighbors in Cherrymore and surrounding neighbors in Cherryl's Village in January this year. In the packet was a diagram of the trail, a detailed letter of the idea, the reasons, and everything we're talking about tonight. We asked for public support, public response, and if there was any concerns, any questions, anything, please contact me. A lot of people did. Through the year, I've been talking to people, walking the trail, everything that I could do to possibly be as transparent and open and welcoming to everyone. We received nothing but support. Any concerns that were addressed or were brought to my attention, I did address right away in whatever way we possibly could. Until leading up to last week, at that point, we had no objections. The letter went out to the people within 500 feet of the trail, respectfully, and at that point is when there were some Cherrymore residents that did bring to our attention that they may not feel comfortable with the easement. We completely respect their views and understand. It was a little bit last minute for us, so at this point, our conclusion, we want to maybe adjust it a little bit and say that we want to work with the HOA. The last thing we want to do is say, sorry, we're doing this anyways, or, it's very important to us to work with them. Ultimately, if the PTRC and planning and zoning and city council all agree that it is the best case scenario here is just to simply vacate the trail, it goes to nowhere, and to take the HOA's recommendation and request to not provide the easement, then the Armstrongs and Bregas will support that as well. But the reason behind the request for the easement was based on the guidance we received from the city and trying to align with the city's vision. So we appreciate your time and look forward to your questions. I'm gonna grab some water if that's okay.
Absolutely. I know that there are lots of notes up there, so I don't know who wants.
Thomas, great job.
Thank you, Fred.
Very thorough. I think you touched all the bases. Last fall, you took Kate Murphy and me on a guided tour of the whole Armstrong property and this particular proposed trail corridor. And so we've had a lot of time to think about it. And I recently walked it twice in the last week. But I have a couple of questions. The way you've talked, I assume from your remarks, you have not closed on the Brega property.
That is correct. The current contract on the home is contingent on the vacation of the trail 2045.
Okay. Have we gotten any clarification on from the HOA in Cherrymore as to whether this can legally be done under their covenants?
So the letter you received did cite two areas within their HOA covenant that they believe are in contrast to the petition that's been proposed. Regarding that question, I'd like to call Noel to speak to that, if you don't mind.
That's fine, but there is no one here in the audience from the Cherrymore HOA, is that correct? Which I find puzzling.
But there was public comment from Cherry Moore residents on this issue. I don't know if they're still on the phone or not.
I can attest that Kathy Melvin, who's the president of the HOA, who's fantastic. She's traveling to visit her parents at the moment, so she would have liked to be here, but she's unfortunately can't be here. But I do know that there are members of the HOA, I'm not sure if there's any board members, but there are residents of Cherrymore on Zoom right now.
Okay, all right, well, here just, I'm not gonna take a lot of time, but, and I've gone back and forth on this. But it's interesting to note everyone's comments on vacating the existing trail easement. And I've walked that trail easement many times and gotten right up to the fence and even hopped over the fence and kept on going. So I understand why it can't be continued. I don't know if the aspen walls are still on the line, but has it ever been explored to see if a trail easement could be created out of their property so that this trail can go through?
I personally don't have the answer for that. I'm not sure if that's been explored, so.
David Aspinwall is prepared to speak on that, it looks like, if you'd like him to.
Well, I certainly wouldn't support that in any way.
Okay.
So I don't know if you could do it or not within your easement. there'd have to be a survey team out there, but I can tell you, I would not support it.
Okay, all right. So I get all the comments of why the trail should be vacated because it doesn't go anywhere. I think many of those same comments can be directed to your proposed easement. Because as I told you last fall, this doesn't feel like a trail to me. This just feels like a sidewalk next to the street. And me personally, I don't like that. It's just a nice sidewalk. I walk through Cherrymore frequently. And the streets are very safe. There's hardly any traffic. And I think, why do we need this? Just walk on the street. You don't need to have this trail. So I guess that's all I want to say right now. I think we can vacate the existing trail. We have several trails in Cherry Hills on what we call Old Cherry Hills, west of University, that are like this. They're short segments and they don't go anywhere. And I get that. But it takes a lot of time to get a trail easement, and so we have to be real careful that we don't abandon these things lightly. It has to be good reasons. We have to fully discuss it on this commission before we take that step. Some people have said, why don't you take the existing trail and when you get up to the property line and ask the walls and breakers, just make a 90-degree turn and take it right back up to South Pine Way. Which is where I walk right now. I get down there and I just go right, follow the fence up to South Pine Way. But if you didn't get this, would Chuck Brigham close on this property?
What's that?
If we did not approve this, would you close on Braga's property?
The contract is contingent on vacating the trail. So ultimately, that was the agreement that they had, was if we can vacate it, the deal's on. If not, then we probably won't move forward with the deal.
Okay. That's all I have for now.
I'm gonna hold off only because I've got a number of questions that I'm just trying to get some facts, so I wanna see maybe somebody else will ask my questions first.
Okay. I have a couple of comments and some questions as well. So as has been pointed out, we're not in the business of, lessening the trails in the village. Our purpose here as a commission is to enhance, improve, and connect. And to Fred's point, I don't see that this necessarily does much connection, but also would be very hesitant to set a precedent that just removing a trail that has minimal function. I don't think it has any function, as one of our speakers pointed out. I'd also take a little bit of issue with the comment that putting this pathway in front of the house makes it no longer habitable, no longer sellable. But on the other side, knowing that in perpetuity, somebody's going to be responsible for the maintenance, care, irrigation, et cetera, it does certainly impair the value of that property. And then looking in this map that we have up here, we have by the red lines, the current bridle trails. And then if you look at the light blue line, which is the proposed easement, where that line intersects with the yellow, which is the vacated easement request, that pale section almost completely connects the trail on the east side of South Pine Way and the trail on the west side. So I wonder if just having that section, which would cross over the 4595 property, but not the 4501, serves the purpose of making our trail system more connected and somewhat reduces the offensiveness that some of the Cherrymore residents might have of having a trail where it doesn't really exist in the rest of the neighborhood. So that would be a suggestion to consider.
I agree with that. That would definitely be an alternative option.
Ralph, do you want to go work for me?
No, I'm good right now.
Okay.
Hey, I did have one question, and that is, when it comes to the covenant of Cherrymore, I'm wondering, I assume that postdates the creation of these bridle trails. Therefore, in their covenant, there already are parts of land that kind of have not been in alignment with the covenant all along. Therefore, I'm not sure if it's an issue of preeminence or not, but I actually do like this proposal. I think the more trails we have, the better. And it's, from my perspective, it just looks like more trail connectivity and none of the burden would be on the city. And that's my input.
This is David Aspinall, if I could respond to that briefly.
No, Mr. Aspinall, I apologize. No, this isn't, this is kind of questions that will be posed. If we specifically have a question for you, we can ask, but this isn't a kind of a, everybody gets to respond, so I'm sorry. All right, Rob, do you have?
Thank you. Thomas, thank you very much. I appreciate the fact that you came. I appreciate the presentation. For the record, I just want to mention that you came to us a number of months ago, and I think we were all anxious to ask you lots of questions. And we did not ask you questions at the time because we understood that it was going to come more formally on an actual referral from City Council, and we wanted to wait until that time. And so, we have waited with bated breath for this opportunity to understand and make a better understanding of what it is that's being proposed. So thank you for that. Thank you to the Braga family, and thank you very much to the Armstrong family for all the work that they've done on this and within the community. Part of, as my fellow commissioners have mentioned, our job on PTRC is to work with our village trail system, which I think everybody agrees is a major, major attraction of the village and is something to be enjoyed, and all of the rights that come with that on behalf of the city owning those rights are not to be disposed of lightly under a vacation process or anything else. So a lot of the questions that I have for you are not intended at all to be antagonistic, but to better understand what it is that we're doing so that PTRC, we can make our job and our decision more with the understanding of what it means for the village. I do want to also mention for the record that the city attorney, who is currently available by Zoom tonight, is a former colleague of mine at the Attorney General's office. I have not seen him in many, many, many years. But at the same time, I just did want to mention that we do have that connection. I don't think it in any way precludes my ability to make a decision here. Last month, PTRC looked at an application on a piece of property a little bit to the south of this property, involving construction of where a barn had been constructed, and the question was whether or not to allow access over one of our trails into that property. On August 20th, I reviewed the minutes of the city council, and it's my understanding that another issue will be coming before PTRC involving a potential vacation of an easement or a public right-of-way or trail in another subdivision within the city. This is a hot topic. It is a topic that we do have legal requirements on how to go through the vacation process, but we don't really have a policy within the city about the criterion upon which we would judge whether or not something is to merit vacation or not. And as a result of that, there were certain criteria that were put forward, and that was why you all put together this wonderful package for us to review. But it doesn't have city criteria that specifically says what we want or how we would value it. One question that I have for you is, while the closing is contingent upon a receipt of the vacation of the property, what is the timing for this? Because the city is in the middle of our master plan rewrite. It is on hold during COVID, but why is it that we have to make a judgment on this before we can come up with a citywide review on vacation easement issues before we can review this?
Well, we've been waiting a year and we understand the process. We have to go through the due process, and we're looking for your guidance on that. And the contract is contingent on the vacation of the trail, so that will have to fall into place as the due process.
The applicant is following the procedure that's outlined in the city code, as is required of them right now, as that's what's in effect. If PTRC wants to develop other criteria separate from that, PTRC is obviously welcome to do that, but I would ask you to consider the application based on the criteria that we, and the direction that we do have now under the municipal code.
Can I just ask a clarifying question? So this is on their private land and it's being donated by the Armstrongs, right? So is this being dedicated to the city then as a trail that will become a public space, or is this a private space?
Emily, you want to answer that, or Jay?
The easement itself would be held by the city, so it would be a public space, but maintained by whoever owns the property in perpetuity.
Right. So I guess that was the reason for my question is, so if this is in perpetuity being maintained privately and it's on private land, I mean, does city code say that they can't necessarily do this? If this was somebody's residence and they wanted to put a trail in, is it the connectivity of the current bridle trails that causes this to be a city issue, not a private issue? I guess it's just a clarifying question. I'm just trying to better understand. If the city's not maintaining it, then how does that public-private piece work? Does that make sense?
Well, it's a city public easement, but there would be a maintenance agreement that anybody can use it publicly because it is a public easement, but it would be maintained privately. But the city's involved because currently the current trail easement and right of way are owned by the city. The easement is held by the city, but it's private property under all of our easements.
And then is it breaking covenant, I guess, too? So it sounds like this may be a covenant issue as well.
I can't answer the covenants. The city does not enforce covenants.
Okay.
Can I ask a question in terms of, if this is understanding that the easement is going to be held by the city, maintained by a private party, when we talk about liability, if somebody is injured on the trail, how is the liability gonna be divvied up, given the property owner is responsible for maintenance and not the city, but it is held in easement by the city?
There is specific language in the development agreement that addresses that our city attorneys reviewed. It will take me a second to get there, but it is included in the development agreement and our attorneys did check that.
Our legal team can speak to that if you like.
Let me see, because that was one of the areas that I was going to, is that in the development agreement for the easement, it is paragraph number, I'm on page 4 of the development agreement, which starts at page 87 of the packet that we received. And
I believe it's paragraph 8 of the easement agreement. If I'm not mistaken.
easement agreement, excuse me, I'm sorry.
Starts on page 72.
Correct, and paragraph 8 specifically is page 74. Says grantor agrees to indemnify and hold harmless the city, its officers, employees, insurers from and against all liability claims and demands account of injury, loss, or damage, including without limitation, claims arising from bodily damage or other loss of any kind whatsoever, including attorney's fees and expenses that might be incurred by the city or asserted against it, which arise out of or are in any manner connected with the easement, to the extent such injury, loss, or damage is caused in a whole or part by the grantor, grantor's contractor, or subcontractor thereof, or by any officer, employee, representative, or agent of the grantor. So it would have to be as a result of something that the grantor did that caused the injury to whoever is there in order for this provision to apply, is my reading of this.
May I bring you all up?
Well,
Okay, now you always have to kind of translate what an attorney says.
Unfortunately, this is not my wheelhouse, so I have to default to our legal team, I'm sorry.
Take the 418 words and get it down to 33.
There's a couple of us that might take offense to it.
Well,
Do you mind if Noel approaches the stand?
if somebody, Jay, would the city plow the snow off this trail in the wintertime?
No, we wouldn't plow this because it is not a hard surface trail. We count the pressure fine trails or soft surface, and we do not maintain those in the winter.
Okay. Would you? Would you maintain the trail, Thomas?
Sorry, was the question, are we going to remove the snow from the trail?
Yes.
We would not remove the snow from the trail. We would be consistent with the same snow removal procedures with the city. We're happy to maintain the trail in terms of its integrity and maintenance of the landscaping and pressure fines, the trees, the irrigation system.
Okay, this kind of helps support my view. In the wintertime, if it's snowing, people are gonna walk on the road that's plowed rather than on that trail. So.
Potentially. Agreed.
All right, why don't you come up and who would like to introduce yourself, answer that question, and we can keep going.
Yeah, so hi, I'm Noelle Worgadella. I'm on counsel for the applicant. And yes, just to reiterate what Mr. Eber said, it is, we would be indemnifying, reimbursing, covering the city for anything that is a result of our actions. And I just wanted to also underscore that this language is consistent with, we took this language from another easement that was already granted, and I don't recall the name of that. Yeah, the Grady project. So we were modeling our document on a prior document for the city. Do you have any more legal questions?
I do have more legal questions, whether we jump in and go through the city attorney first or not. I guess I can ask the question. And, I want a legal opinion on whether or not this, well, while we may not be enforcing covenants, I don't know that the city can enter an agreement that basically relies upon a violation of covenants. And so I think we need to understand whether or not this is a violation of a covenant.
Yeah, understood, and, we have not had the chance to talk to the HOA about that yet. It's our opinion that it's not a violation of the covenant. The covenant that was referenced was that it has to be used for residential purposes, and in our opinion, this does not preclude the lot being used for residential purposes. Really, we could maintain the house and somebody could live there and we could grant this easement. So we don't believe it's inconsistent with the covenants. We have not had the chance to talk to the HOA yet because we did just get that information from them, just within the last couple of days. So we just really haven't had the chance to reach back out to them and talk through that issue with them. But it's our opinion that it doesn't, and we reviewed the covenants as part of this process. So we were really surprised to hear that, and we don't think that's the case.
I'm happy. This is Randall Sampson. I'm happy to weigh in on this question too. First of all, I would concur in that assessment. I would have a high level of confidence that the provision cited, Section 4 in the covenants, that requires, that prohibits use of lots for other than single family residential purposes would not preclude the granting of and the use of a pedestrian easement of this nature. Those sorts of restrictions are not untypical, and I think they speak to the principal use trying to be controlled and prevail within a development, and that is single family residential as opposed to, for example, multifamily residential. But easements are of many different natures, are an essential component of any development. I would point out that the plat has a bridle path easement, albeit at the back of this lot. It's platted, if I understand it correctly, if I recall, that easement is a part of the plat and is on the lot. So I'm confident that that covenant restriction is not violated by an easement of this nature.
Okay, thank you very much. And consistent with that, I guess there are some other trails in Cherrymore, trail numbers 4402, 4522, 2245, and I am looking at one of the pages of the submittal that basically has the Cherry Hills Village trail map on it for the record. I just want to clarify for the record with the city that none of those trails are easements granted by the property owners. They are easements, in essence, of HOA property, I guess I would say, because they're not by the individuals. Is that correct?
I can't speak to that.
Actually, those easements were dedicated with the plat. Each individual property owner still owns the property, not the HOA. So those easements would be similar to this easement, even though they were dedicated with the plat, not.
So there are easements already in Cherrymore on private property that is single-family property. The distinction here appears to be that it is at the front of the property versus either the rear or side of the property that some of these other trails within Cherrymore seem to have.
And as Mr., this is Randall Sampson again, as Mr. Goldie pointed out, even on this lot, we have a platted and dedicated trail easement. It's a utility and drainage easement also, but dedicated by the plat. It's an easement, only an easement. So the underlying fee simple ownership, it still resides with the owner of the property, the Bragas. So it's identical really to the proposed easement at the other, on the other side of the same lot. It would be an easement only. They would continue to own the fee simple, but be obligated by virtue of the development agreement to maintain that easement. That's also not untypical to shift maintenance responsibility to the fee owner. That often happens in the context of, say, drainage easements or retention ponds or stormwater facilities, where they may be constructed and effectively owned by the city. That responsibility is placed on the fee owner of the property to maintain those ponds or whatever the facility might be.
One question I have, the easement agreement says that the easement is granted by grantor shall be permanent and perpetual unless vacated by the city after appropriate action by the city council, which is obviously what we're doing right now on the other easement. And so what prohibits, it's a slippery slope, I think, in terms of what prohibits the next person, if the Armstrongs go to sell this property, from saying, we're gonna come before you, and unless this easement is vacated, this one that, let's say we grant today, or recommend and it moves through, if it's granted, this new easement, what prohibits that new homeowner, when that house is sold, from coming back and saying, I'll buy it, contingent upon that easement being removed? And I think that, you know, we have our trails and everything, there's a lot of easements throughout the city. And so one of my questions is, do we start, and I know it was mentioned earlier by Ms. Fury, but this precedent of, well, but nobody really uses it, because I can see this argument and I hear the homeowner saying, there's no sidewalks in Cherry Hills. There's like a little bit of a curb on Dahlia, but other than that, there's really no sidewalks in Cherry Hills. And so saying, we don't use this easement, so let's get rid of this as well. So I think those are some of my concerns, that we're going to start this precedent that anytime somebody wants to take that back to make bigger land or do whatever, what sets this apart from something else?
Well, certainly in the discretion of the commission to consider the merits of the request. In this case, an easement is being proposed to replace the one to be vacated. You can't prevent one from petitioning in the future elsewhere for a vacation, but that discretion will always reside with the commission in terms of its recommendations, and to the same degree, the planning and zoning commissions, and ultimately city councils. So, you know, I wouldn't think that it sets a precedent. Certainly the applicant has set out reasons why it may or may not make sense to you guys to, in this particular instance, under these particular circumstances, to consider the vacation because of the simultaneous and contemporaneous granting of a new easement, which will be maintained, unlike the existing one, by a private party.
Understood. I think the concern I have is, and you referenced the merits that were brought forward, and I think Commissioner Ebert brought this up, of we don't really have a kind of, here's a checklist we have to hit in order to determine, because, you know, everybody has their own merits in bringing things forward. And so that's, I'm not saying I'm for or against this at this point. It's just a concern I have, that when we discuss these things, we have to look at it as the full of this, or the entirety of the city. And, you know, our trails are so important to maintain who we are as a city. And so I have, you know, that's my concern. And the concern coupled with the homeowners who really don't want to see basically kind of a sidewalk put in front. And so that's kind of what I'm trying to balance out.
Thank you. Let me get back into some of the specifics if I could. Thank you very much. I don't think I need any more legal interpretations right now. I'll bring Thomas back up. I want to make clear that the trail that is being used is part of the right-of-way, and there is a separate easement that includes a bridle trail that also consists of the utility easement. I need to get the facts straight because it's unclear whether or not this bridle trail is within the square footage of the right of way, or is it additional square footage beyond the right of way? So help me out.
I think the city can describe that.
The trail as constructed is within the race right of way. The 20-foot easement that is dedicated as a trail and utility easement currently is not fenced and is not utilized as part of the trail system. It's actually in the Brega's yard. You would never know it was a trail.
So am I clear that we are being asked to vacate both of those, the trail that is currently in the right of way as well as the trail, right, the bridle trail that is delineated as an easement for a bridle trail in the Brega property?
Correct. There are two different issues. They're asking the easement to be vacated and the right of way to be vacated.
Okay.
That would still leave the utility easements in place.
Correct. What is the area, please, of the right of the square footage of the right of way that is requested to be removed?
You'll have to give me a minute to pull it up.
The race right of way is about 1/4 acre. The trail easement is less than 1/4 acre.
So the race area is 1/4 acre, so approximately 10,000 square feet.
Correct.
And the area of the easement is less than 1/4 of an acre.
It's about 8,000 square feet.
Okay, so we are being asked, just so I can make clear on the record, to vacate approximately 18,000 square feet of land.
The utility and drainage easement would remain in place, so it's the trail component of the easement that's being requested to be vacated. But we would, the city retains the drainage and utility easement as just utility and drainage.
Correct. So the Race Street piece is approximately 10,000 though, and we're taking the bridle trail piece off of the, what would remain of the easement of about 8,000 square feet. And the area that will be obtained as a result of the new easement is approximately what?
8,000 square feet.
What is the width of the trail currently in Race Street?
The fencing is approximately 15 feet wide.
The fencing,
The fencing on either side of what's being used as the trail right now. So, and that trail isn't pressure fine, it's just a grass, it's like a regular city bridle trail, it's just grass.
Yeah, it's delineated at 15 feet wide.
15 feet wide, okay. And the, so what is about to be vacated would be approximately 15 feet. The width of the easement for the new easement would be
15 feet. There's a it's a 5-foot setback, right? And then an additional 15 feet on that, correct?
Correct.
5-foot setback. So a total of 20, am I correct?
Correct.
And the trail itself will be how wide? I believe it was 6 feet wide for pressure fines and 3 feet on each side to either have gravel or soil. I think it says in the proposal.
Yeah, so the current proposed landscaping design indicates like a 6 to 8 foot pressure fines path. And we are looking for, if we move forward with this, we make the recommendation, we are looking for guidance from the PTRC to ensure that the landscape design does meet your vision of what you would ultimately like it to be. So that's why when we say 6 to 8 feet width is approximately the width of that pressure fines trail that on that current existing trail that is on the south end of 4595 that goes across the Tough Street Bridge. So we're figuring that as that rounds around 4595, we would stay consistent with that, and that would meander through within the 20 foot easement. landscape features on either side.
And when it talks in the application about pressure fines being on the new easement surface, that is what you're thinking for the main 6 feet part?
Yes, correct.
And what type of gravel are you actually talking about? Is it, I mean, so large gravel that horses aren't going to be comfortable being on that gravel, or what size gravel?
So I think you're referencing, I'm just gonna grab this other map real quick.
I'm looking specifically at the landscape plan as best I could.
Are you talking about the trail surface itself, are you talking about? The pressure planes, which is a 1/4 inch minus.
Correct, and then on each side of the trail, I believe it says.
Yeah, so that was, the landscape designer put that in, that's kind of to be determined. I think we would probably not do the gravel on my side, so we just do a 6 to 8 foot pressure fines that would go run straight into mulch and turf on either side. I think we safe to say we omit that gravel border that's indicated here. If that makes sense.
My concern in the ask is the ability for the equestrian community to continue to be able to make use of this trail in a way that accomplishes what I think it is that you all want to accomplish with it, and whether that is done under the current plan. So that's why I'm asking my question.
Yeah, the pressure fines would be consistent with the trail that's in place on the south end of 4595, which equestrians use frequently.
Thank you. The application indicates that it helps with the connection, and you talked a little bit about that before. Please help me understand a little bit more about the connectivity being enhanced by this, since it doesn't, as you mentioned, it has eyesight to trail number 4522, I believe it is, and it has eyesight to trail number 4620 across the street. But I guess I'm trying to understand a little bit about how it makes connectivity better, especially since it dumps all of those trail users back onto South Vine Street at the north end of 4501, the south end of 4401, and we have heard a comment from the owner of 4401 that he would not entertain having an easement to extend the trail up to connect to those trails further north.
Absolutely. So I understand what you're saying, and as I said, it improves the connectivity in comparison to the current trail. We wish it had full connectivity, but that's not part of this proposal. So currently, if you come down this trail right here from the Tufts Street Bridge, I'm gonna call it, you just dead end into South Vine Way. So then you have to find your way either north or south down the street, down to Woody Hollow Park, or you head up this way here. You can go onto the street a little bit and then connect with the existing trail to nowhere if you wish. There's also another trail here that starts that runs alongside the Allen property. And so with this connection point here, with the Armstrong's offering an easement on 4595, it does directly connect to an existing trail. It also provides a kind of nice rounded access point to it. It's not even a 90 degree. It would have a nice curvature to it as you're riding your bike or riding your horse. So that's a direct connection point. As you come along here, when you are a direct 90 degree across the road, let's say from that other trail I just referenced that goes beside the Allen property, you could put little trailhead indicators here where it's you literally just directly crossing the road. So it's not touching, but I would consider that is consistent with other trails in the village where you have to cross the road, and I would consider that a connection point. As you get to the northeast corner of the property, again, that's where the trail would end, 15 to 20 feet shy of the property line, because we're maintaining an access driveway. There would be another trailhead marker indicator there. And I believe with the new trail signage that's going out, there's gonna be a lot more clarity as to how to find the next trailhead. So we're hoping that would be part of this. So from that point there, I can actually see it up on your display up here. And I see where the blue line ends on the northeast corner of 4595. And then if you just follow South Vine Way to north, you see where the red line connects. So yes, they do not directly connect, but it's a lot closer. It's a lot closer than the termination point currently of the trail that's at the south end of 4595. So, for example, my 7-year-old daughter would have a much easier way going from trailhead to trailhead with a very short segment of straight road, line of sight to the next trailhead. She can cross the road, go to that trailhead, and boom, safely back on the trail. So that's where we consider it to be enhanced connectivity. It does help keep people off of, again, walking around the blind curve where there are vehicles coming down the road. And my 7-year-old, I always tell her, stay to the left, stay to the right. She's veering all over the place. So I feel like she would be a lot more safe on a trail than veering all over the place on a road. So I do understand your point, Fred, though, that there's gonna be periods of time in the year when you can't go on any of our trails if there's 2 feet of snow, unless you're really trudging through. So that would be a similar case there. We would have to use the plowed road for access.
Okay. And again, I think I'm looking at our trail map, part of the village, or it is the application that is included. I don't have a page number, I'm sorry for the record. I had a question about trail number 4518, which is basically the South High Street on-street trail that comes down to 2043. And I want to understand from the picture here, it looks like even though High Street stops before trail 2043, there is a trail that goes all the way up High Street and connects with 2043. Is that correct?
Yeah, you're actually walking up somebody's driveway there.
That's actually street right of way. They put their own gravel on it, but it is road right of way.
Yes.
So there is trail connection between 4518 and 2043.
Yeah, that's the main differentiator between the 2 segmented trails. The one to the north, if you do come north to south, and you come to that dead end, you actually have somewhere you can go down the road versus the 2045 where we're speaking of, where there's nowhere to go unless you cut across the private property.
So if you were coming south on 2043, you could turn right onto 4518 and go back out to High Street, am I correct?
Yes.
But you cannot go straight ahead onto 2045 without going off the cliff. And that was the comment of why it's not feasible to connect the 2 trails, correct?
Correct.
And similarly, 4520, if you came south on 2043, you could turn left onto 4520, correct?
Yes. A few years ago, this was not an issue, but then the whole bank collapsed.
Correct. My point is I'm trying to understand that while we do now have the record of the fact that the trail to nowhere is a used trail, and I don't think anybody actually says it's an unused trail, it's just a question of what use it is. Am I right?
Correct.
You physically can't get through there because of the cliff.
Correct, but up to the cliff, you are able to make use of a city trail that is grassy, correct?
Yeah.
You can walk to the end and then come back, yes.
Correct. Okay. And I just want to confirm again for the record that the trail is that we're being asked to vacate is a grassy soil trail,
Yeah, that's-
and it would be replaced by a pressure fines trail.
yeah.
Yes, correct.
Yes.
Okay.
Chair Gold, we do, Tori has a comment whenever.
All right.
Let's-
All right.
Hey, I actually, yeah, I'm looking at the trail connectivity, and I think we have a lot of other options as well. I understand Mr. Aspinwall's concern about this, but I also think that perhaps considering kind of a bartering system might increase connectivity. We have a few other properties as far as 4500 South Vine, 23 Cherrymore Drive, where we could perhaps keep this connectivity while minimizing the amount of street time, I guess, that pedestrians or equestrians would have to do to get back onto the other trail. But I actually would not be opposed to the precedent of bartering per se. I mean, I think in this specific proposal that it's in our city's best interest. It would be quote unquote a more than fair trade and would be no burden on us financially. As far as future connectivity, I see a lot of options. So that's my input.
I mean, I would say for the record, just on that, is that as homeowners, I think property rights are of the utmost for all of our homeowners. And so to do something with hopes that future homeowners or current homeowners will also grant easements to make connectivity. Personally, do not believe it's appropriate. I don't think it's appropriate to ask the Aspinwalls to make connectivity for our trail system or anything else. This is their property. I respect their property. So I would disagree with that. One question I have, and you two may not have the answer because I understand that some of this opposition came very late. Have we had if we just vacated the bridle trail without the front of the 4501 South Vine easement, have we talked about, I don't think we just vacate it and say, thank you, here you go. I think that if property is being given that, or being, I don't know what the best word I want to use here is, taken by the homeowner or given whatever, is there a cost that the city would then absorb for turning that easement back over? Have we looked at that at all? And if the answer is no, that's okay, because I understand this is all brand new for everybody.
When these petitions come in, if the ask is for just a vacation, then per the code, we would have done a evaluation and hired, I have to read the code. We would have gotten an appraisal and then staff's recommendation would be either, no, we don't believe it should be vacated at all, or here is what the cost would be for that easement based on the appraisal. But when the request is to swap land, then the city has the option not to do that and go through that expense if that's not what the petitioner wishes to do.
Again, I want to look at the existing trail and ask if someone were to walk down that trail from the south side of 4501, right along Vine Way, and walk north, what view do they currently have down into the Armstrong property or to 1900 East Stanford Avenue property, or are those both Armstrong properties?
Yes, they're both Armstrong properties. So the view essentially on the west side of the split rail fence that runs down the existing bridle trail on the Armstrong side has a berm and trees. So primarily conifers. There is one point about 3/4 of the way down the trail where there is an access point in the split rail fence for, say, Armstrong landscape machinery that would need to go through there. And so there's a little opening in the landscaping where you can see down towards the Armstrong's house.
So currently, was that view one of the pictures that you showed us in the presentation earlier?
I showed you a view due north. I didn't turn to the west and show you. And just to kind of speak to your point, Rob. Janie kind of mentioned this earlier about the open space, and I think where you're going is with the kind of accessibility of the views towards Little Dry Creek. And so currently, in this picture, so we've actually removed the home in this image, and because this is like a representation of what it would look like after the home is raised, the trails put in, and currently there's a big berm that runs right along here, which would run right alongside the current trail. So the plan would be to all of these mature conifer trees that are on here, we would spade them, and they would be used for part of this landscaping features along the new trail. It'd also be used along the property for 501. And then that berm, all of that earth would be removed. So this would naturalize this property down to Little Dry Creek, whereas currently it's kind of divided. So the idea is that as people end up enjoying this trail, there'll be vantage points through the trees, looking down through a natural rolling hills to Little Dry Creek. We actually want to open up some access vantage points to that beautiful feature and trail village, better than they are currently. Not to mention the power line that I mentioned that's right about here. It's just the main eyesore when you're looking this way. So we really want to enhance the sight line. So let's say, for example, you're driving your car down South Vine Way. Right now, as you come around this corner, it's blocked by a house. So the house will be gone. You'll have nice open space views as you come driving down the road or recreating along here. And as you're on this trail, those segments of views that come through will be enhanced from what they are currently.
Yield to Commissioner Wolf for a moment. Just one question. Thomas, last fall, you told us that once the Braga home is removed, the Armstrongs plan to turn this property into a arboretum. Is that correct?
So it wouldn't, arboretum theme. So we kind of would consider that, you know, when I first started with Mr. Armstrong, and I said to him, you know, I came to a beautiful property. I said, what's your vision? What's your theme? And he said, I love trees. And he said, have you ever been to the Dallas Arboretum? I said, I haven't. He goes, you have to go. I love that concept of just mature trees that you can walk through and enjoy, and there's different species. So that kind of a concept, not any sort of a commercial arboretum.
Right.
Personal, private,
right.
Just place with nice trees.
Because once the home is removed, then obviously you have a lot of open space, and you would fill that appropriately with trees.
Yes.
Okay. Now, if that's the case, then why not meander the trail up through those trees rather than hug the side of South Vine Way?
Are you speaking here on the East Berm where the big pines are?
No, push the whole trail inside the Braga property. You end up at the same place, but it has a much more interesting route through the property as long as you say this is going to be an arboretum.
So that's actually a good question. When we were in the initial creative stages of what could this trail look like and how do we create this really unique, interesting nature trail? And what we originally thought was we could do kind of an accumulation of widths on the trail. So some places maybe it was 30 feet wide, and some places it would come down to 10. But based on the input and guidance from the city, it needs to be a consistent width. We can't really jump in for a certain amount of distance and come back out. That's the way we understood it. So it wasn't really an option to come in too far into the property. We had to remain within, use the 5 foot right of way that exists, and then 15 feet in from that, and then create the trail within that 20-foot slot.
I need to clarify that we never said that the trail could not, you could cut the trail through the middle of the property if you wanted. We did not, staff or the city did not say where the trail easement had to be. We would like a consistent width if we were going to maintain it. If it was a grass trail, we would maintain it, but it was never said where the trail had to go.
Right.
Just a consistent width.
Right.
So, anything else before I jump back? Where I'm going with this is I'm trying to compare the experience one has on the trail to nowhere versus the experience one will have by using the new trail. And currently, it sounds like if you go on the trail to nowhere and you look to the left, you see a big berm. And you don't really have much of a view down into the Armstrong property.
That's correct.
Under the new, you will have a more expansive open space feel because subject to your ability to look through some trees and whatever vegetated wall they present, the idea is that the Armstrongs hope to allow a little infiltration on their privacy, I guess I'll say, by allowing the user to have a broad view down into Little Dry Creek.
That would be correct. In the design, that a lot of it's been driven by Paul, is that we would strategically place trees and things where you may not get a direct view of, say, the Armstrong's home, but there's a nice, beautiful section that goes down to the creek and, you know, across the open space. Like that would be the focus of where we want to strategically pick great vantage points. And we're not talking about building a, you know, kind of a wall of vegetation by any means. It would be a beautifully landscaped, this area along here. It's really important for the Armstrongs for things to look natural in the way that they are in nature. Not something you drive by and go, oh, that was just somebody just planted all those like a row of trees. So we want it to feel very natural. This area where the home is, obviously would be backfilled and the whole property would be regraded down in a very natural flowing way. The pond would remain, the pond would probably get expanded a little bit larger. So the koi fish are happy. And again, you would be able to have vantage points through vegetation to see the pond and down towards Little Dry Creek.
Okay. Thank you. There was a comment made earlier that it looks like a fancy sidewalk along, nicely landscaped along the street. And there was a comment made earlier by Commissioner Wolf that when you came to us last fall, it seemed to give the impression that the trail was going to be far into the Brega property, not along the east edge like it has now been put in the application. I do think it looks an awful lot like a fancy sidewalk. I don't think when we talk about meanders, I'm not sure what the width is, but I think this is a slight curved path, not a meandering path. That's why I'm trying to understand the experience that makes this trade-off worthwhile to me.
And just to touch on that, the current trail design is a preliminary design open to guidance and feedback from the PTRC. The city is not a final document like this is ready to go. We want to make sure that everybody likes the design, it has it meets the vision of the city, and that it is an interesting trail. Nobody wants just a boring sidewalk by any means. We definitely want it to create as interesting of a trail as we can within that space.
At the same time, I want to make it very clear that where I think I look at this as an interesting trail, I want to make it really clear that the Armstrongs think that that's adequate, because I'm looking for something that goes fairly significantly into what I call the Brega property. And I am also very cognizant of their private property rights. And I am hesitant to approve something on an idea that the trail isn't final. We've been given a landscaping plan that makes it look like we're voting on something right along the edge of the road right now. And, you know, I'm not really sure that we should be approving something on a trade with something that may or may not change at this point. I guess I'll just leave it at that.
I guess what you're looking to approve is the vacation and the dedication of the easement. It could certainly, and then I don't know exactly how this works, but the trail design be contingent upon approval. You know, we could get much more formal, much more detailed trail design crafted. Once this whole thing, if we get it approved, we go to that level and make sure that the city's happy with the design.
So a question I have is, and of course you said that you have been in kind of conversations with all the homeowners and everything for a significant period of time at this point. And only kind of recently did we get some opposition, I think, at the last minute for you. So my question is kind of based on, I think, what both Commissioner Wolf and you were talking about, is that what was the rededication of the easement first told to kind of the other homeowners that are around? So 4401, 4500, 4502. When you first talked to them and they're on board and everything else, what was the easement that was described to them? Is it similar to what Commissioner Wolf was saying, or was it something different? I'm trying to figure out why the opposition has come all of a sudden at the now. Is it because, quite frankly, it has changed? And so now the other homeowners are saying we don't want a beautiful sidewalk, nonetheless, it's beautiful, but we don't want a sidewalk kind of looking at us, or is there other reasons based on your knowledge?
It's a great question. We, as I mentioned, we sent the package out in January. I made a point right out of the gate after we started talking with the city and kind of came up with this conceptualized idea, which I did in the beginning. We were thinking it could kind of vary in widths.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, Jay never said we couldn't cut a trail through the middle of the property by any means. But that just unfortunately is not really an attractive option for the Armstrongs. If we're to do this, it will be on the perimeter, 20 feet in and within that swath. So when I made a point to meet with the direct neighbors, the Aspinwalls, the Allens, I actually just met Chris Bittman. He's due south of 4594. He's not in the HOA, so I didn't have his contact information. It's kind of weird. 4595 is actually, for the record, not part of the HOA, nor are those remaining homes on the west side of South Vine Way as you go south of 4595. Yeah, I made a point to.
Sorry to interrupt. That right there is the concept that was given to the city. I believe that's the one that the neighbors saw too. So it's very similar to what is there now.
That was the original thing that we sent out. And then the city requested that we have a more formal landscape design put together. And that's where we landed with our current design over here. But yes, this was presented to all the neighbors. I made a point to directly contact any of the neighbors that were in close proximity to this, to reach out, to welcome them over to the property, to walk it. And there was the Aspinwalls and the Allens were the two that took me up on that offer. The direct neighbors to physically walk it and walk along and try and envision what it would look like and feel like, and explain the berm situation that would go away and the views down and all that type of thing. And get the feedback. And that was where Alan said, we don't want a sidewalk. And I said, I agree. Nobody would want a sidewalk there. So how do we make this so that it doesn't look like a sidewalk, it doesn't look like a boring trail, it just looks natural. It really just fits in with the community, fits into this beautiful property that will flow down to the Little Dry Creek is the vision.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Thank you for the appreciate it. Any other questions?
I see exactly where everybody lives that has been against this, okay? Including 3 people right across the street and then 2 further down into Cherrymore. So I mean, they hold a lot of weight. I know that the 21 letters that you got from people supporting this, out of the 21, 19 do not live in Cherrymore. So I would put those letters aside because I don't think they matter. They don't live in the neighborhood. That's my feeling, okay? I still don't know why you can't meander this up to the trail, up to the property. And I'm thinking that maybe you want to retain that property so that someday if somebody does want to buy that property as a residential lot, you can sell it as such and there's no trail meandering right up through it.
As a representative of the Armstrongs, they have expressed their desire to present this within a 20-foot swath from the road. They haven't expressed any interest in actually bringing the trail through the middle of the property, or that just wasn't something that they expressed, and it's not what they're looking to do. So
I just want to follow up on that, and I apologize for interrupting. When we talk about trail location is not final and things like that, what is final though, at least currently in the minds of the Armstrongs, is it will be within that 20-foot pathway on the east edge of the property.
That's correct.
It will not go further interior, shall I say, to the west.
That's correct.
Okay, I just want to make sure for the record.
Absolutely.
So from the standpoint of connectivity, which we've talked about tonight, this trail doesn't connect to anything. It just dead ends right back into South Vine Way. That's it. I mean, that's why I don't see why this is needed at all.
Okay.
It's just, you just don't need it. If it were a busier street, I get it, but this is a very quiet neighborhood. And I think this is spending money that doesn't need to be spent.
Do you feel it's an improvement on the current trail?
Well, the current trail that we're talking about vacating, frankly, I don't even see a connection here. It's almost, they're two different things. They're apples and oranges.
Well, that's ultimately we're looking to realign the existing trail with a better, nicer, enhanced, longer, and more connected trail.
Let me follow up on that.
Neither trail goes anywhere.
I understand, but in our opinion, it is better than the existing trail. And so we, again, through what we were told from the city and through our research was that we understood the guidelines and or the vision of the city, and we tried our best to create something that fell within that.
And I want to.
We completely understand it's not the perfect thing, but this is what we felt is our best offer to kind of try and fall in line with the vision of Cherry Hills Village Trails.
Right. And I appreciate that. And again, I think what we are trying to do is figure out, is the trade the appropriate thing on behalf of the village trail system and things like that. So the hard questions aren't meant to be antagonistic, it's to be able to do our job.
Absolutely.
And one of the comments that you just made, I want to just make sure that the record is clear on this. There was no quid pro quo where the city came to you and said, if you get this, you will do this. This was the Armstrong-Brega proposal, an offset that you generated on your own. And that was not a quote requirement imposed on you by the city.
That is correct.
Okay.
I'm just gonna kind of try and wrap this up a little bit. You have a few more questions? Okay.
See if I can, I'm sorry. Don't give a lawyer a bunch of papers. I want to turn my attention to the easement agreement, page 2, paragraph number 2. It says, except as otherwise provided in the development agreement, the grantor won't build anything basically on the easement property. And I tried then to go to the development agreement and it talks about nothing being built there. So I just want to make it clear for the record, there isn't going to be anything built, but the development agreement doesn't allow any construction of any structure in this right of way that is going to be dedicated.
That's correct.
We did not see the development agreement for either the Brega or the Armstrong piece of land, but I wanted to ask for your representation that nothing would be built that would interfere with this arboretum field that would make it so that you cannot have a view playing back down into Little Dry Creek.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand the question.
We don't have the development agreement for the rest of the Brega property.
There isn't one.
Okay,
So that's private ownership, it's only for the easement, dedicated easement.
But as you know, I was basically talking to you about the idea of if there's really gonna be this sense of open space, that we want to be able to see back down into Little Dry Creek at least.
So I guess you're referring to what our, essentially our master plan for the actual property would be itself.
And is the Armstrong family willing to make an assurance that the experience of being able to enjoy Dry Creek that is being given up will be replaced by whatever comes along this new trail?
So we'll walk over to my map here. So the extent of the, I guess, master plan for the property at this point is as simple as this. We have not got into engaging a landscape designer or a master vision for it on paper. But so what I can tell you at this point is exactly what was shown here, which is just really trying to recreate nature, really trying to open up these sight lines, removing the power lines. The power lines are actually going to go, so they come across the creek here, and there's a pole right about here. They'll go down at that point, and they will actually be underground right along the utility easement, right down to this corner right here, and they'll make 90 degrees, and they'll go underneath this existing trail where they connect with the next pole and they'll go back up. So basically, instead of seeing this large transformer pole right here and the lines that cross over Little Dry Creek this way, that this section will be removed. That's something that is part of like the vision of what this will look like, and we have that lined up to move forward on. But in terms of this master plan, that will be a collaboration between Paul, myself, the Armstrongs, as to what this will end up looking like. I have to talk to them about, and our legal representation about maybe how that's written in, where we, show that to the city, make sure you all believe it's in alignment with what we are proposing today.
I understand, thank you. One of the requirements on the development agreement in paragraph 2.3, which is page 2 of the document, page 88 of the record. It says, enhance landscaping in trees, shrubs, and herbaceous perennials within the new easement to be constructed and installed by owner. And I think that I would ask that that be constructed, installed, and maintained by owner pursuant to 3.1.3. Just to make that clear that the maintenance obligation is included in that definition.
And 3.3 goes into the obligations of maintenance, so, but.
Next page. Correct. With respect to the landscaping plan, I tried to do a little bit of homework and understand what equestrians need to make use of this trail. And frankly, a 6-foot wide trail is not sufficient for them. And I'm getting a little bit nervous about approving a 6-foot wide trail with another 6 foot wide of something being 12 feet, when I'm being told that a 12-foot wide trail is still not sufficient for equestrian. And the one that we're replacing would be 15 foot wide is what I understand. And I've been told that horses, in order to pass each other safely, need 16 feet. So if 16 feet of our 20 feet is going to be needed for horses to pass each other, this is a pretty straight line trail. and not a whole lot of curve to it. From what I understand and have been able to understand about the equestrian community's need for this trail. It's to be an offset from an offset. And I'm not sure this gets you there. That's my comment number one. Number two, with respect to the landscaping, the equestrians being on 5 feet in the air plus the height of a rider, we need to have the landscaping plan include that a minimum height allowed for equestrians to pass under safely.
Yeah, we do have, we do have that. It's absolutely, well, we're gonna take into consideration the heights required for equestrians. And in talking to equestrians about this, because we want to make sure that this trail is good for them. Just because the crusher fines is say 8 feet wide, that doesn't mean that those horses can't go off of that crusher fines. They can walk on the grass, they can walk on the mulch. There will be a wide enough area for horses to pass. When we spoke to equestrians, they said, if I need to move my horse to the left and even onto the road, I certainly have that option. They're not cordoned in to some like really tight channel or something. We will plan it out in a way strategically that there's always enough width for horses to pass. Very important to us, and the height.
I appreciate that. Making use of the 20 feet though, when we have horses passing and people, pedestrians or bicyclists, I do think that the trail envisioned as a 6-foot trail is inadequate.
So we did say 6 to 8, which is based off of the existing trail that is just south of 4595. It has grass on either side. So if 2 horses were to pass on that section, certainly they would kind of move to the one edge of the 8-foot trail and the other edge of the 8-foot trail, and so that they could safely pass, which would be the same case here. So this trail being 20 feet wide is actually 4 or 5 feet wider than the traditional trail trails in Cherry Hill Village.
Understood. The easement envisions a non-motorized use. As you know, last month we looked at the issue of motorized vehicle using our trail system. We have in the past been looking at the issue of e-bikes, whether or not they are considered motorized, which opens up the whole question. And we are going to be relooking at this issue. And the question that I have is, do the Armstrong family, does it understand that, well, is the Armstrong family willing to allow something, whether they're scooters, bikes, uni-wheels or whatever they're called, if that comes up, or we would need to be able to modify the easement, or does that end and they say, no, we don't agree to that, and then this is got to be kept separate from the rest of the trail system?
I don't think ultimately they'll have the say as to who can go on and off of this public trail. That would be forecasted by the city, and we would follow whatever rules you set in place. It's a public easement. We maintain it, but we don't set the rules. We don't tell people what they can do and cannot do. That's up to the city, I feel.
I understand that, and maybe I'm kind of looking past you to your lawyer here.
Yes.
But the easement envisions non-motorized use. And if the city, for some reason, allows motorized use, i.e. e-bike, is that going to be a problem? Because maybe we need to anticipate that use in this easement.
Yeah, so that easement again was consistent and based on the prior form. So we were following the city's lead on what form to use. So I think that's going to be the case for other easements throughout the system. And I think we would, you can look at that now, or you would address it how you would address it.
No, that is correct. Our standard easement is exactly the wording we have in here. There's probably half a dozen of those that happened after plating processes that would have this same agreement that say non-motorized.
Yeah, and my only question, I mean, obviously, all of those easements, if some type of motorized vehicle is deemed desired by the city, I want to make sure that the Armstrong family understands that there would be to be consistent with the rest of the trail system, we would reapproach the Armstrong family and say, we would like to expand this easement to allow an e-bike or an whatever. But make it very clear, we never on PTRC envision having go-karts gas powered on our trail system.
Right, yeah, and I think that was what I was gonna say, I mean, if you're expanding the use of the trails to accommodate new types of technology, I don't think downtown are gonna object to e-bikes, but look and feel sort of like normal bikes, I think if it's dirt bikes or something like that, that would be questionable, so I think it would just have to be dealt with in the same way that it would deal with it with all the other properties that have that language.
Just a couple more questions if I can.
Very quickly, because I mean, it's almost 8 o'clock and we need to wrap this up. And our job is to make recommendations, and I think we have a couple questions to discuss. So very, very quickly.
Sure. It's my suggestion that the landscaping plan where it has lawn, in keeping with the idea of trail surfaces and kind of the semi-rural feel versus a suburban feel, I would highly recommend that that be replaced with a field grass or something that is desirable for a more rural feel that is agreeable to the city still, but I do not like the idea of a landscape lawn because I think again it goes only to the feeling that this is nothing more than a beautiful sidewalk along the street.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I will make the comment that I do not agree that South Vine Way is a busy street as was represented in the application. I do agree that there is a corner that, you know, may be harder to see around, but we do have an on-street trail that does provide the connectivity all the way from the south end of the proposed easement, all the way up to the trails that we talked about before. And so I echo Commissioner Wolf and some of my other colleagues' comment about whether or not this is needed at a time when the question is of giving up the easement that is desired. I guess in closing, I am uncertain that there is an absolute benefit to the proposed easement when we already have a South Vine Way on-street trail, that unless there can be some assurance given to the city to be able to make sure that users of that trail can experience the wonderful view that the Armstrongs are kind enough to offer. Unless that can be codified in a manner, I don't understand the purpose of the new easement when you already have an on-street access, trail, excuse me. I do think that the bundle of sticks that the city holds as a property right are just as important as any property owners in this village, and that we need to be very, very, very strict about reducing or eliminating. And I think the question that we do not have development of this trail to nowhere now is not indicative of its potential value to the city, and that it needs to be very much in the city's interest in order to give up any of its property rights. And I'm not sure that as proposed, the new easement provides that sufficient to give up the old. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, thank you, Mr. Gray.
Thank you.
So appreciate it. I think that there are kind of two questions we have here, and I think it was addressed by the homeowners and a lot of the public comments we've gotten, which are number one, the recommendation that PTRC will make regarding vacating the right of way and the trail easement. I think that's one. I think the second question is, do we recommend that they move forward with the South Vine Way easement at the front of 4501 South Vine Way? And I think that our comments from my fellow commissioners about what that trail should look like and to ensure that we can take care of our bridal community and things like that, I 100% echo. But I think that, not to do a pun, but it might be putting the cart before the horse at this point. So, Emily, if you are okay, I don't know if you want to take this as, I guess I'm looking to the city about, do you want this as a, is it your full recommendation that if we give up this easement, we get this easement, or is it take one and the other? What is the city's position? And that way we can go forward as a commission.
Our recommendation is to vacate the existing right of way and to accept the new dedication, but it's PTRC's discretion. You can change the recommended motion in your packet to recommend one to P&Z and not the other. But the staff recommendation is the same as it is in the packet.
Let me just jump in and say, I guess I'd like a little bit of an opinion from council that the applicant has come to us and asked us to approve a vacation and a replacement. And I'm not sure that we have it within our authority to break this down into a only vacate. If we can't give them both, can we give them neither, or can we parcelize it? Because the application came in and asked for both. So I don't know whether or not we can get an opinion that we can break this apart or not.
Well, I think my opinion would be you have this, you're an advisory body making non-binding recommendations. You have the ability to fashion your recommendations broadly, I think. Those could include the staff's recommended motion, which would approve all aspects of the proposal. It could be a recommendation to approve both the vacations and the dedication of the new easement, conditioned upon many of the things you've talked about tonight, ensuring a view towards Little Dry Creek, field grass instead of lawn. You know, it's a recommendation that will be taken into consideration by subsequent decision-making bodies. And so I do think you have wide discretion there.
Can I make a comment? So I don't love the idea of approving the vacation of a public, as a representative of the community of Cherry Hills Village, I don't love the idea of approving the vacation of a public access area for the purposes of, you know, private consumption. Recognizing that the Armstrongs are, you know, signs of community and very generous, wondering if it might be something that they might consider to, rather than vacate, find a way through their property at 1900 East Stanford to actually connect that right of way to East Stanford and make it something where the community can enjoy the arboretum-like nature of their entirety of their property. That might be something they would consider.
In other words, Aaron, if I'm reading right, where our yellow trail now dead ends.
Mm-hmm. Go left through.
Go left, cross a bridge over Little Dry Creek, turn right, go north, far enough that you can go up and connect to the existing red trail again.
I was thinking more connected to East Stanford, because I don't know where the property line ends for 1900. I don't know if it's the square or that squiggly thing that crosses the Dry Creek. If it is the property line is the further north one that abuts 4545, then yes, perhaps we can create an easement that would actually cross the creek once or twice and make that connectivity possible.
Which gets to the point, are the Armstrongs comfortable with a public trail going through their property?
I'm not sure that that's in alignment with the vision of what we're proposing today, which
I
is
understand,
to,
but if you were faced with the scenario that the answer is no, would they consider doing that to get some but not all of what they're asking for?
that's a question I have to pose to them.
And I'll go you one further only because we're moving off of the proposal with a new proposal.
Right.
But, you know, clearly what the Armstrongs would like is a contiguous piece of property without public access to the middle of it. And I understand that. And, you know, if I was sitting here from day one trying to come up with a new replacement easement, given that we already have an on-street trail on Vine Way, I would consider whether or not a replacement might be the east-west northern line of the Brega property. And then add that to something then that allows going into Stanford, which is what my fellow commissioners mentioned already, is come in from Vine Way on a westerly fashion on the property line, get to the terminus of the current trail, turn right, and then go to the end of the north side of 1900 Stanford, and then make a left that dumps you back out onto Stanford Avenue, because that does give some connectivity east-west that maintains the sanctity of the Armstrong property. And I don't know, maybe the Armstrongs also own 45 South High Street, I don't know.
No, they do not. The topography and the little dry creek that runs there essentially would make what you just described very, very hard to do. I mean, already we're saying that we can't go through there because of the erosion. So I'm not sure what the differential, we still have to cross the creek and then.
I'm looking at a map, that's why.
Yeah, it's definitely hard to see. We'd be happy to welcome you all to the property so you could go and see. It's very rugged. The Little Dry Creek does this big serpentine through there, and on the other side of Little Dry Creek what is it, 4.5. It's a very steep embankment, and it's all rocks, and so I don't off the top of my head don't see a plausible way that would kind of make its way through there. But and again, ultimately, I don't see how that connects the landscape vision for 4501 and 1900 and 4595. So, you know, I understand what you're saying, that if that's not a possibility, would they consider other options? Certainly go back to the drawing board with them, but right now, you know, we are looking at how do we kind of combine that landscape flow. I do would urge the commission to maybe entertain Commissioner Aaron's suggestion of just doing the easement on 4595, which would not offer, you know, still ultimate connectivity, but would offer something. You know, give a little bit more connectivity to the trail if there's, you know, because there is obviously a lot of opposition from the Cherrymore residents of it actually wrapping around the property, so that might be kind of a compromise. If that would be something that would be considered. Might simplify things too, because 4595 is not part of the HOA, so it's not subject to those covenants. It would be one easement instead of two easements, so something we can consider. And then also, yeah, we welcome any other ideas of how we can make this work. That's what we try to do, is be as creative as possible. But certainly the main objective is to a seamless, you know, flow, landscaping flow from 4595, 4501 down to Little Dry Creek. And so the only way to do that is to vacate that trail.
I think at this point, while I appreciate all the different ideas, and I think that'll be great, obviously, I think your clients have to approve it, so there's nothing in terms of making decisions here. So I think for our purposes here, we need to make a decision what recommendation we are going to make to planning and zoning. And that may be not moving forward, that may be accepting what we've been given, or to look into alternatives, whatever that might be. I think at this point, we need a motion about what our recommendation to planning and zoning is going to be. So do I have one?
Yes.
All right.
A motion, yeah. to, yeah, I propose a motion to express our, oh, can you not hear me?
Go right, go ahead.
Is this better?
Much
Okay.
better.
Yep, I'll make a motion to, give our opinions on what we think we should do to our proposal.
What I'm more looking for, Aaron,
Well, I think the first thing I would say is I think we need to split it into two motions. And then, so.
why don't you make your first motion?
Anything written here that I can copy? No?
Do you want the memo? There you go.
All right, so the first would be, and I can go either way on this when I recommend the motion.
You can make the motion and then vote.
Okay. All right, so the recommended motion would be, number one, I move to recommend the Planning and Zoning Commission, to the Planning and Zoning Commission, the approval of the vacation of the bridle path easement and right of way on 4501 South Vine Street. And then the second, do that now or do it after?
Well, if we're gonna make it as one motion, we need to have a second first. And
No,
then
no, I mean, I think it should be two motions.
understood, but we have to have a second to that motion.
Gotcha, okay, so I'm gonna end it.
Alright.
Can we clarify that? Can you clarify that, Rob? What he just said?
I'm just gonna ask you just to repeat, because I started out for just a minute.
Okay. Let me try again. I move to recommend to the Planning and Zoning Commission the approval of the vacation of the bridle path easement and right of way on 4501 South Vine Way.
The motion that is presented is solely to remove the easement, and it sounds like Commissioner will have a second motion to follow, but we're voting strictly on that one piece of that motion. So do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Oh, discussion first.
We have a motion and a second discussion on the proposed motion. I'm a little nervous as to whether or not we are seeking, I look at the question of vacating as one that is, what is the trail system being offered in exchange by the Armstrong family of vacating this easement and allowing them to have a contiguous piece of property? And whether or not the presentation of a new easement, to me, is sufficient merit to give up the old. And
I'm wondering if we can actually reverse that and let's do the other motion first. I think we would all love the dedication of a new non-motorized trail easement just for the sake of that. And perhaps we could withdraw the first motion and then reverse it.
Well, I don't think, I might be speaking out of turn, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I don't think the Armstrongs want to just dedicate the front of their land without probably a guarantee that they are going to get the easement in the back.
That's right.
All right,
Of course.
yeah, so I think we need to, I think the question, so I think,
4495 is already.
so I think the question is, do we want this to be, during, I think what you're bringing up is, do we want this to be a motion that requires both pieces or two separate motions? Is that kind of how I hear what you're saying?
I mean, I appreciate the difficulty of this, but I look at this as they have offered this in exchange for that. They have, we have not required it, they have offered it.
Okay.
And therefore, I look at this as a question of whether or not to give up this based on what is it that I'm going to get.
Okay.
So for me individually to look at this as a vacation or loan issue is difficult for me.
Fair enough. So we have a motion pending, so then let's take a vote, and if that motion does not pass, we can have a second vote on a different motion. All right, so all in favor? Opposed?
Aye.
Abstain? Okay, motion fails. Would you like to make the second motion? Anybody?
And this is on their proposed new trail, right?
Or I see that this could be we are allowing the vacation and not recommending the new trail, but in lieu of that, specifically saying that we seek the monetary payment for the abandoned, vacated right-of-way and the bridle path value of the existing trail that would still, or excuse me, the existing right-of-way that would still be left in place.
Right.
So
There's two options.
there's still two more options.
Yeah,
All right, who wants to make a motion?
I propose that we not recommend the Armstrong proposed easement along the South Vine Way right away. And, I mean, for me, and we need to, I think we need to have some further discussion on this vacation issue. I'm just not comfortable with that at all. It takes us so long to get any trail easement. It's gotta be another way to figure this out and retain that.
So am I understanding that you are making a motion to not recommend vacation and
I'm sorry, just for clarification, so we're not all losing our minds later, could we recommend or deny?
Yes.
Please.
I recommend that we deny
Yeah.
the application.
Is there a second?
recommend that we deny the application in its totality.
In totality.
All right, I'll second that.
All right. Second, Aaron.
Sorry, can you repeat it? Can you please repeat the motion?
Commissioner Wolf recommended that we deny the application in its totality.
Okay, I just have one question. So this is denying the application as is. Does that mean that they can resubmit the application?
This is
In
on
a different
recommendation.
way? No, that I understand. I'm saying, are we denying this application with the option that they can resubmit another application in the future? But in the application as it exists today, with this current proposal is being denied. Is that correct?
My
If
understanding is this.
it's our recommendation.
My understanding is it's our recommendation. Planning and zoning can go against our recommendation, make a different recommendation to city council. City council ultimately will make this decision. This is not actually our decision.
Totally understand all that. I guess what I'm asking is from our recommendation standpoint today, if this were to carry forward, does this allow them to resubmit a new application in a different form with different guidelines? That's my question.
Absolutely.
So if I were to say aye and deny it, they could resubmit it in a different form for reconsideration, if we're gonna go all the way through up to council.
And to further clarify, since the recommendation is a denial, the vote in favor is in favor to deny.
Correct.
Wanna, am I allowed to ask a question on that? With what you just stated there, you said, are we able to reapply? Do we have to start from square one?
What are you considering square one? So we would,
A whole new petition, a completely new process that we just worked on for 9 months or 10 months.
this would be a question for the city attorney. If they brought forward a new petition for vacation, whether that would.
They could modify that petition and randomly say different. I think if the applicant chose to modify their petition, they could start back, they could ask to come here again before it moved forward to planning and zoning and city council to try to get a positive recommendation before it went to either of those. So I don't think you'd have to start from square one.
Yeah, and I believe because the way the code is written, it's the petition, the formal petition to city council was for the vacation. If that piece isn't being changed, if the petition for vacation is the same and it's the proposed trail that's being modified, I believe, Randall, correct me if I'm wrong, the
I believe-
destination piece could
I-
change.
I think you're correct in that characterization of the code provisions.
Ultimately, our goal is to get the recommendation of the PTRC. For us to go to the Planning and Zoning Commission with a non-recommendation from you, I don't see a reasonable path forward from there. So what we would like to respectfully ask is rather than just turning it down today, is giving us guidance and feedback as to how we can make this work. And so that we can, whatever we have to do to come back and with your considerations, or your requests or alterations in place so that we can look forward to a potential recommendation from the PTRC. It's very important. This is a trail. You need your recommendation.
This is an informal body. It's an advisory body. I don't think anything prevents the commissioners from having a discussion and possibly reaching a consensus on that sort of guidance that they might give to the Planning and Zoning Commission and ultimately City Council. That might be in the structured as this is our recommendation, denial. Should you be inclined to approve? These are recommended conditions or modifications that we would suggest. Again, it's a very informal process at this stage of the process.
I had a clarification. Do we have to motion to do anything? Can we just ask Mr. Berry to possibly refine the vision of this trail that may be more in line and more likely to be accepted by us before we even move to do anything?
Well, some of those concerns and what might have been potential conditions to a recommendation of approval have been discussed again, ensuring the view towards Little Dry Creek from the proposed new easement. You can go through that list or discuss others. And ultimately, though, I think it would be appropriate to reach some sort of consensus by way of a motion. Although the code speaks only to you making recommendations. You've made a recommendation, so I think that's the heavy lifting. You can certainly provide guidance, help to the applicant in understanding how they might want to modify their application going forward, but also guidance to the Planning and Zoning Commission by suggesting what might make this proposal in its entirety palatable.
So currently we have a motion pending, which is to deny the application in its entirety. I think there was a second.
That's the formal recommendation of this commission that doesn't.
No, that's not the formal recommendation. We have a motion pending, and so we need to vote on that. So, all in favor?
We have discussion.
Denying totality.
Right, isn't that what we were
Motion in a second.
Yes, we did that.
A motion in a second, and then we have discussion.
And we just did that.
Okay.
So, all in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Aye.
So,
Victoria, were you for or against?
Let's try this one more time. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Aye.
Aye.
Abstain? All right.
Now, having made that, I guess my question is
that good?
May I ask what the vote was?
4 ayes, 2 noes.
4-2.
Randall, 4 in favor, 2 against.
All right.
do we now want to make a guidance statement in addition to the vote having just been made, or did we give enough tea leaves in the discussion to?
Emily, let me ask you this question. If, with some further guidance, is it possible that the Armstrongs can come back, and while I know they're progressing through, but represent some changes so that PTRC could potentially get on board and support the position. I should have asked that first before we take a vote, I'm really sorry.
That's okay. We would by no means force the applicant to move forward to planning and zoning at this time if they chose to modify their application. If they're not modifying the vacation piece, if they're modifying the dedication of the trail, I believe it would be within their rights to come back with a new application to PTRC. A modified application to PTRC.
I agree. I think they would have the option to modify, not modify and go on to P and Z, modify and go on to P and Z, or modify and come back to this commission. I think those are all available options.
Thanks, Randall.
So I think at this point, I guess I would ask you, Thomas, would you like recommendations from the commissioners as to how this might be there might be more support from PTRC moving forward?
Well, ultimately, yes, that would help us in moving forward, because we just come back and present to you with a bunch of other ideas that aren't in line with what your vision, that doesn't get us anywhere. So if you could give us, here's an outline of the things we'd like to see, and then we can discuss it with the Armstrongs and see if those things align with their vision. If they are, then we could incorporate those, come back to you all, and hopefully come to mutual agreement moving forward. Or you could be comfortable in making a recommendation moving forward once we satisfy your request.
Okay. To try to cut to the heart of it, if you had your wish list, exactly what you wanted, forget your blue trail and vacate the yellow. That's what you want.
Ultimately, I'm a representative of the Armstrongs, and so I'm just doing my best to share their vision and do the best I can to come up with a proposal that reflects what they're attempting to do. It also takes into consideration all the visions and guide and master plan of the city, community. This is all we're trying to do, and so that's where we're looking for your guidance on this. So how do we accomplish this in a way that we have the support from Cherrymore on the trail vacation, but there's a differential on the new easement. There's obviously different opinions on whether the easement's good or not good. So we'd love some guidance as to how can we find a way to make this work.
Because the Armstrongs are not comfortable with a public trail that goes through their property. That's what it boils down to.
It boils down to the fact that they're trying to merge the landscaping between 4501, 1900 and 4595. And you can't do that the way it's existing with the existing trail. So that's the objective right now, is to vacate that trail so that we can accomplish that. And so we've done our best to try and find a way that we felt that the PTRC and the city feels a great opportunity to enhance and expand and create a unique trail that costs the city nothing, maintenance included. We thought it was a great proposal, but we look for your guidance as to how we could amend this and change it in a way that it does align more closely with what you're looking for.
I guess one of the things I maybe ask is I kind of go back to my earlier statement about homeowners' rights. I don't expect any homeowner in Cherry Hills to have public easements down the middle of their property. I don't think I would want that. I don't think anyone would want that. So I don't expect the Armstrongs to have that. So I think kind of a question then for the commission to provide feedback is there anything that can be done on this, what I call the blue trail, that would make it more palatable? And if not, is it just a question of do we want to vacate the existing right-of-way trail and trail easement? And I know it's getting late and I apologize, but I think ultimately at the heart of this, I don't think any property owner wants something down the middle. So I think, is there going to be anything that they can do along the blue trail? And if the answer is no, then the question really becomes the first motion that Aaron put forward, which was, do we get rid of that easement? And that's what their application is. So I guess I'll tell that to everybody to provide feedback. And if the feedback is going to be the only way we like this is through the center of the property, I think we need to have a different discussion and recommendation to planning.
Yeah, and I would really be in favor of a discussion because I think this is a highly complex issue. I think there are a lot of moving parts here. For example, the Commissioner Wolf's points earlier, a couple things, you know, we don't live in the neighborhood, yet we represent BTRC in the city. And so what is, you know, from the BTRC standpoint, having trails, having parks, having recreational spaces is a great, in my opinion, is a great thing for the city, is a great thing for neighborhoods. The safety component that comes with the way the trail is currently in line, with the way the road curves, and to your point, Thomas's point about safety, I have young children, I understand just not being able to have a sight line just for safety purposes is a consideration. I think there's a lot of generosity in this offer. I think that burying power lines is a benefit to the city. Yet there are so many things to consider with how long it takes to get an actual easement for a trail. And the complexity that it takes and just to blindly vacate it seems just a little bit hasty. And I personally would love to take a tour of this myself and actually see the property and actually have a little bit more of an objective opinion because I'm not a neighbor. And I also think that while I understand the connectivity issue, I also understand that people are very resistant to change, and this represents a really broad stroke change. You know, I think that there's a lot of benefit to this. I see a lot of benefit in doing this, and I think that it warrants further discussion. And it also would kind of require us to, I mean, in my opinion, again, I would like to see it, and I would like to understand what would make sense so that all this time, work, and effort, and all of this, you know, truly giving back to the city, which I also think should be taken into consideration from our commission, because we're representing the city, and a homeowner wants to give back in this way, is willing to maintain it. The perpetuity point, I understand that's a consideration for future homeowners, but there might be somebody who really wants to take on that responsibility. You know, it's really complicated, and we should, I think it just needs some more time and some more conversation that's partially legal and partially, you know, policy driven, but also just partially looking at the big picture of this and stepping back and looking at what this actual give is and what is being provided here. So I would like to be comfortable with the recommendation that we could make, like some kind of a middle ground that would kind of appease everybody. And I'm just not at that place yet. I mean, the documents are one thing, there's paper, and then there's, you know, visuals, and there's actual understanding of the dynamics and the people involved and how it's affecting the community. And I do want to take all those things into consideration.
What are the other commissioners' thoughts on what Chelsea
Well, I appreciate the comment. I think it's exactly right on, that there is a whole lot of good in what the Armstrongs have given to us as a proposal. I'll just flat out say that I look at this as a huge burden to overcome to merit the village giving up its property rights and or trading them for others. And when I looked at this and you know, the breadcrumbs of my comments make it pretty clear that I don't think the Crusher Fines trail that basically is against an already existing trail provides sufficient amount of an offer to merit the city giving up its bundle of rights with respect to its current existing property. I do not take lightly the fact that there is a huge advantage to the applicant for being able to put together 3 parcels and have a contiguous piece of property. That's a huge get for them. And I think it merits a huge offer. And I'm not calling it a quid pro quo, because that was not what you made it very clear, and the record is very clear, that this can either go on a formal application to vacate, or if there is an offer as an offset, that I guess I just didn't see the nature appeal of a Crusher Fines grass lawn, not very meandering, but still a little meandering. I did like the vegetation. I think the vegetation cover is great. But I just didn't see the trade-off sufficient in my area. So, it takes a whole lot for me to give up a city property right. And I'll just stop there.
I think the commission has established through the motion that this trail is not palatable. I think what would be most helpful at this point for the applicant would be for PTRC to provide some direction about what might be an acceptable alternative.
Well, that's all fine and well, except that they spent 9 months trying to come up with a creative solution, so I don't know that we're gonna best that in a 3-hour PTRC meeting. I think.
What about extending the trail to the point where it ended? Because I somewhat see Commissioner Eber's perspective that seems like a pretty special spot that even the other neighbors seem to love, Ms. Waddington. And maybe giving up that vantage point is the sacrifice we're not willing to make. And if somehow the trail extended along that northern border, it'd be a way more attractive offer while keeping their properties contiguous.
Commissioner Kuzminski, what were you saying?
I lost my train of thought now. I was just saying, I think the recommendation would be, let's work together and try to find another option than exchanging a currently in place path to nowhere with a new path to nowhere. The purpose is to have better, improved connectivity pathways. That to me is not the solution, and I think we're all in agreement with that. So let's find, maybe it's not on the map, I don't know what it is, but maybe there's a solution we haven't thought of. I don't know what it is right now. We've come up with a couple suggestions, but I don't have a recommendation other than let's kind of work on it.
So maybe if we could do this, Emily, I know if we all go out to the property, it does need to be noticed because we are all together. But could we come see the property? And
That would be fantastic. It's really hard to understand the vision of this on paper and even through photographs. And I understand your concerns, Rob, with it's hard for you to envision what this trail is going to look and feel like. And so if we could all go there and collaborate and get some ideas of what is possible, I think that would be, we really appreciate that because we put a lot of effort into this.
Thomas, can I ask you a question on that?
Yes.
Could you approach their clients, right?
Yes.
And ask them about any alternative options that they're willing to make so that we could discuss, where their boundaries are.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I think at this point, the interested, sorry.
Real quick, Randall, can I get some clarification? Would the commission be able to meet with the applicant while there is an active application in front of them?
There is a question of open meetings law compliance. The concern is not prejudgment and ex parte contacts and those sorts of concerns that are part and parcel of a quasi judicial process. This is, as we've mentioned a number of times tonight, this is not that. A vacation is legislative in nature. This is an informal advisory body making non-binding recommendations. So I suspect, however, that under the definitions of a public official in the open meetings law, we would run up against a problem with respect to commissioners meeting together unnoticed, whether with the applicant or without the applicant. So that is my concern there.
I think we would notice it. We've done field trips before and they've been noticed.
If they're noticed, then that open meetings law problem would be solved.
Okay, thank you.
So
I think at this point, what we can do is, Emily, if you can work with all of us to, within the next couple of weeks, to get a meeting prior to our next PTRC meeting in October, right? Or September?
So, yes, I can do that. for the applicant to come back, they are going to need to notice that meeting. We'll have time, right? Okay, we'll need sufficient time to have noticed the meeting between you all and the applicant on site, and for the applicant to renotice the PTRC meeting. So I will try and work as quickly as I can. If you all can just respond as quickly as you can, I can send that out as soon as we find times that would work.
Okay, so let's do that, and then we can have discussions after we all get to the property, see the property, and see it visually rather than on paper. Is that good for everybody? Fantastic. Okay. All right, moving on. Reports, anything quick. I do not have any current reports as a chair. I am actually, I can't think of anything that's come up. Emily, is there anything that I'm missing with not having any special events?
No, I have a few reports, but I don't have anything specifically for you.
All right, do any of the commissioners have reports? I'll start down here. Chelsea, no? Fred? Rob, any reports?
No reports, thank you.
Fantastic, I appreciate that. Emily, thank you everybody for coming, we appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, I appreciate it.
Okay, sorry.
Sorry, I'm trying to do a million things.
Yeah, so coming up next Tuesday on the 15th at 5:30, we'll have a tour of the new park for City Council and for PTRC. So we will walk around, show you all the new amenities. We are still working on getting the park open. We still need some safety inspections and some final touches, but we'll make that announcement as soon as we can get it open. Updates from City Council on the first, the Quincy Farm Master Plan is officially paused by City Council while the city explores the opportunity presented by the Anderson family to transfer that property to the Anderson family or to a foundation. And if you missed this update, City Council did vote to deny the application by the Skolniks for a revocable license for access to that trail. And we've since heard from the Skolniks that they've found alternate ways to get hay delivered without using motorized vehicles on that trail. So but we did receive that follow-up from them. Included in your packet at the very end is our draft priorities list for PTRC. The only change is based on the last meeting. We talked a lot about recreational programming, so that change is incorporated. This is still subject to council's review of the budget moving forward, so it might change based on what happens with the budget, but I will keep you updated if it does have to change. And lastly, we got bids back for the Highland Canal connection at the Hamden underpass. The low bidder was Hammond Construction, who installed both underpasses. They're up there already. That bid was $645,000, so we hope to be taking that to council on October 6th. Those are all my reports.
I have a comment. Quickly, Harriet Lemaire has called me and she is trying to assemble a group of people sometime at the end of this month, the first part of October, to all meet and help clean out the Highline Canal. So I don't know anything more than that. She may be calling you.
The only other comment that I have real quickly is that I would like to consider adding a potential priority of funding trail development on our existing routes that are not yet developed pursuant to the question that came up tonight and what we have, or what we seeing again. There are many trails in the village that we own that are not used, not developed, and we need to make an assessment on either spending money or not.
I completely agree. I think we need to look at our overall trail system and decide which pieces go nowhere and we can eliminate them, like we're talking about, and which pieces need some connectivity. So,
Emily, I do know that we had kind of talked about maybe doing e-bikes in October. Given we are going to go out to this property, and I'm guessing we're going to have another discussion in October, I prefer not to have both of those on the same night, so we can get home that same night.
Yes, it would also be helpful for staff timing if we could bring e-bikes forward forward in November. Council did, I missed that update, I'm sorry. Council did ask for PTRC to consider the issue of motorized vehicles on trails, so I will have a lot of information prepared for you for the November meeting.
Thank you.
Staff bikes so we can test.
So, ironically, the police department has an e-bike in their budget for next year, so.
All right, anything else? It is now 8:43. Adjourned.
Hi, y'all.
Thank you, Tori.
No, no, he's not a state.